Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if Naruto was the second husband of cute Albedo? Movie. In the game of Yggdrasil there existed tens of thousands of guilds. The number of members ranged from dozens to thousands. The guild that stood at the top of the charts happened to be one of the smaller guilds with several world-class items at their disposal. The guild of Ainzal, with only 42 members in their guild, was easily a force of pure controlled malice. The guild of being so evil that guilds across the server had an open bounty on all the members of Ainzal. Led by the three kings of hate, the guild Ainzal waged a war against all human races of the Yggdrasil. Ainzal had been called unbeatable. Their guild base, the Great Tomb of Nazir, 10 floors made impenetrable with even an 8-guild alliance, only being able to make it past the 7th floor. On the 8th floor of Nazir was the true headquarters of the guild, with the main meeting room of the guild being adorned with the personal flags of each of the 43 members of the guild. Currently only 3 members of the guild were present. Although the third was just passing though. The guild master of Ainzal, Momoga. Momoga, if you asked her, an Earl didn't think that she was beautiful, but average at best. In Yggdrasil however she made herself a beautiful wrath sorceress. Standing at 5'10", she was the shortest of all the female members of the Ainzal. She was cool, busty and curvy with a slender and toned stomach and mile-long legs, knee-length death white hair, blazing red eyes, a tattoo in the middle of her forehead, wearing an armor-bone bikini that was made from the skeleton of an abysmal one, with the bikini bottom having a large red gem in the crotch area, knee-high white high-heeled boots, more because they made her feel wide than anything. Elaborate jet black academic gown adorned with golden and violet edges, several rings on her fingers that augmented her already formidable magic power, and a necklace that had special meaning to her within the game. 1. The frontline commander Yuzukage, and he was tall in his human form, standing at 6'4" with muscles that showed that he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, violet eyes, 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek, and a pair of finnick fox ears on top of his head. A single fluffy fox tail protruded from his tailbone, wearing a red short-sleeve flaming haori, the orange and black sleeveless kimono, black pants, boots. Around his neck was a green gem with 9 larger black orbs around it. Finally, a member of the guild who hadn't been present in almost a year. A slime by the name of Hero, a purple slime monster that was formerly part of Ainzal's strategy team. If he had come in full armor he would look like a hulking golem. Together these 3 were the remnants of Ainzal in the final hours of the game. "It's good to see you after so long, Hero-kun," said an excited Momoga. Yuzukage nodded and tried to keep the smile off his face. He and Hero had often worked closely together. "Yeah. Almost a year since you were a fully active member, Hero. Really that long, huh? Can't say I'm surprised. Ever since I became middle management my days have bleed together," said Hero. "I know the feeling. Remember, I'm a salary woman myself, unlike someone standing here at the moment," joked Momoga. Yuzukage gave Momoga a playful glare. "Just because I have a bit of cash doesn't mean anything. Remember, I still have to actively run my company, otherwise the board will put Blue Planet in a bind," said Yuzukage. Out of everyone in the guild, Yuzukage was the only one who actively knew 3 other members in Earl. Blue Planet just happened to be one of them. Hero chuckled. "I see you 2 are still the married couple of the guild," said Hero, happy to see his friend still being so happy. "As if I would marry this fleabag hag," yelled the 2 as they glared at each other. Hero looked around the hall. "I still can't believe that the 2 of you managed to keep this entire place running, and in such good content and for all this time," yawned Hero. "Are you alright, Hero-kun?" asked Yuzukage. "Yes. I just haven't gotten much sleep lately, my friend. It was a good 8 years. I'm just sorry that I couldn't be here longer," said Hero. Momoga nodded to her friend. "I'm glad you were able to at least make it here. Many of the others declined it or didn't even answer my email," said Momoga. Hero nodded to this. "I was sure that Confronting would have come. He had the biggest crush on you," said Hero. "On her avatar maybe," groaned out Yuzukage, making the other 2 laugh. Confronting had been part of the guild's perverted trio alongside Whitebrim and Tabur. Between the 3 of them they had some of the kinkiest annual NPCs in Nazir. Hero looked around one last time. "We had some great times here. I'll see you 2 around. Hopefully in another game," said Hero. Before either Yuzukage or Momoga could say anything, Hero logged off. "Damn it," cried Momo, "no Suzuki-sana." The woman behind Momoga, and she slammed her fist into the polished marble, putting a large creak in it. Uzumaki Naruto got up from his seat and walked over to Sana, and gently took her hand. "It's alright, Sana. We both knew this was coming," said Naruto. "It's not fair," said the woman as white hot tears began to leave her eyes. "We pour our blood, sweat, tears, ideas into this place. How could they just abandon it? Abandon us to be alone?" Naruto gently pulled the woman into a hug as he allowed her to cry. It wasn't like he couldn't understand her. No, in fact it was the opposite. He agreed with her 100%, but knew that Ainzal was always a doomed organization because of its 2 founding rules. 1. You had to be a working member of society. 2. You had to have a heteromorphic race. The second rule wasn't important. It was the first rule that a doomed dog. As a working member of society, several member of Ainz followed their dreams. Yukubika Chikuma had become a renowned voice actress and was in high demand across the industry. She ended up leaving the game 3 years ago. Yumiko had become a high school teacher. Touchme made the biggest jump of them all and became a politician. There was even a time where it looked like Naruto was going to end up leaving the game for several years. It was only thanks to a major breakthrough and smart financial choices that he was able to keep on playing the game. All 42 members of Ainzal had hopes and dreams outside of the game, or at least that was what was on the surface. Truth Naruto and Sana had come to learn many a thing about each others that made them become closer over the last year, where they were the only active daily members of Ainzal. It took another 5 minutes for Sana to calm down from her fit. Once she did, she wiped her eyes. As a rule between when the other was in an emotional place, they dropped all pretense of their characters and became themselves. Despi Uzumaki Naruto, CEO of Yuzu Industries, one of the founding father companies of the deep dive system, and Suzuki Sana, a woman with a degree in business management and stuck at a dead-end job as a team lead. 2. Forgive me Yuzukich for that shameful display of weakness, said Sana, slipping back into her character of Momoga. It's fine, Momoga. So shall we take a stroll to the throne room? Asked Yuzukich. Momoga nodded. For this I think I'll bring the staff of Ainzal. Momoga held out her hand and summoned the staff to her. It was a Ricculum twisted staff with 7 serpent heads and 7 different elemental colored gems held in their mouths. Momoga took a step forward, and once she was 3 steps ahead, Yuzukich fell in a step behind her. Once in the hall they saw the Paldi's battle maids and the head butler of Nazark. It's a shame they never got to see battle, said Naruto. My thoughts exactly. It would be a shame if they never left that place. Follow, said Momoga. In no time all the group arrived at the throne room where the ornate throne of Ainzal stood tall and proud. Only one person had ever sat upon it, Momoga, a testament to their strength as a guild, as a team, as a family. Momoga sat down with Yuzukich taking a step to her left. Standing before the throne was the Overseer NPC. One of Tabula's creations. Albedo, impeccable beauty. Albedo is a woman with lustrous jet black hair and the face of a goddess. She has golden eyes and vertically split pupils. On her left and right temples are 2 thick horns protruding crookedly, and on her waist are a pair of black angel wings. Wearing a pure white dress with silky gloves covering her slender hands and a golden spiderweb necklace that covers her shoulders and chest. Kneel, said Yuzukich. All the NPCs bent to the knee before the serpent beings. You know, I always wondered about Albedo's settings, said Momoga as she raised the staff and opened Albedo's settings. What the hell, Tabula? Said Yuzukich as they read her bio. Momoga's sweat dropped. He always did love his contradictions, said Momoga as she got to the last line of text. On the outside, she is a perfect beauty. On the inside, she's a bitch. Naruto took a step back as Momoga's eye twitched. Tabula, you perverted cuck, yelled Momoga. Why did you ruin beautiful Albedo with such an evil bio? If I ever see you again, I'll cut your dick off, roast it slow on an open grill, and then force-feed it to you as I make sweet love to Albedo. Despite the way she talked about the perverted trio, Sana herself was fairly on the kicky side, since she had told Naruto during a raid on a succubus den that she was bi. Naruto accepted it and even figured that her first meaningful relationship was with a woman. It should have also been a big hint that she was a pervert because the mega-perverted Pro Orsino was Sana Momoga's best friend. Naruto Yuzukich had learned this when he had seen the perverted trio and Momoga going over the setting of Sheltier's harem. But they had used their own resources in this fashion, so it was up to them how they dealt with it. Although Naruto himself would admit that the vampire brides were quite lovely, not as lovely as his demon Kunoichi or his personal NPC, but they were pretty close. 2. Feel better? Asked Yuzukich, sweat dropping at the woman. No. I'm going to chance her setting to something more appropriate, said Momoga. As she brought up the settings using the admin powers of the staff. Naruto raised a brow at this. Rule 6. Do you oppose? Asked Momoga, looking to her comrade. Yuzukich shook his head. Not really. I just think if you change her, at least keep her original programming somewhat intact, said Yuzukich. Very well then, said Momoga. Is madly in love with both Momoga and Yuzukich. Well, it seems that she has a hard time choosing between the two. She knows in her heart of hearts that both would accept her and each other, should the chose ever come up. Careful, Sana-chan, that sounds a bit like a love letter, teased Naruto. Sana had the decency to blush. I'm just adding a touch of dramatic flair, Naruto-kan, don't worry, said Sana. Before another word could be said, both players noticed a timer appear in the edge of their visions. 30 seconds till server shutdown. Naruto took Sana's hand in his own. It's going to be hard to see this place go, said Naruto. Sana nodded. I know it is, said Sana. 20 seconds till server shutdown. I'll look for a link to another game and send it to you, said Naruto. Sana nodded. She thought about it for a second, before reaching up and kissing Naruto on the cheek. I'll see you soon, K. 10 seconds till server shutdown. You know, if it's not too much trouble, I'd like to see you early, said Naruto. Sana smiled. That sounds like fun. Shoot me an email and we'll cook something up, said Sana. Naruto smiled. It's a date, Sana-san. 11:59 and 58 seconds. 11:59 and 59 seconds. 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock and 1 second. 12 o'clock and 2 seconds. 12 o'clock and 3 seconds. Did they delay the server shutdown? Asked Yuzukage, but in a voice that was deeper and stronger than his normal voice. Perhaps they did, said Momoga, her voice more sensual with a hint of a lustful undertone. Momoga-sama, Yuzukage-sama. Came a voice that neither of them had ever heard before. A beautiful that tickled the ear and promised things to not only your heart, but your very soul. Both Yuzukage and Momoga looked at Albedo, who had a look of confusion on her face. Is there a problem, my lord and lady? Asked Albedo, tilting her head in confusion. What the hell was going on? 00000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 They acting as their characters in that moment, or are they acting as their characters in that moment, or are they acting as their true sleeves in that moment? Yuzukage and Momoga looked at Albedo in shock, awe, and confusion. An NPC talking. How? It was impossible, aside from small greetings, and the AIs of NPCs were limited to smart combat. Sure, there were a few modders who did things to the game, but even they didn't do anything like this. Yuzukage, call the GM, said Momoga, looking to her comrade. I already tried, Momoga. The GM call function is inactive. Not only that, so is my menu function, said Yuzukage. The wraith put a hand on her chin. This is not good, said Momoga. My lord and lady, I apologize if I have failed you too in my lack of knowledge, said Albedo, inclining her head. The fault is not yours, Albedo. There was a shift in the field that protects Nazark, said Momoga, thinking that up on the spot. Yuzukage turned to Sabas. Sabas, take a squad of demon shinobi and Kunoichi to the surface. Explore the area for any and all dangers, but do not engage. Find out what you can and report back to us within 2 hours. Until then, raise the defenses of Nazark to threat level 4, said Yuzukage. Sabas snapped to attention, placed his hand over his heart and bowed. By your will, Yuzukage-sama, said Sabas. Pleiade sisters, return to the throne room and guard it from any intruders that may have breached our protections in the meantime. Yuri Alpha, go and check on Oriole Omega in the Cherry Blossom Sanctuary. Once you have made sure that she is safe and secure, make sure that our portal network is secure as well, and that no one has slipped past our defenses, said Momoga. Yes, Lady Momoga, said the 6 sisters as they all exited the room with haste. This could all still be a game, you know, said Yuzukage, putting a hand on his chin. We need a way to test it and see if it is. What about me, Lady Momoga, Lord Yuzukage? Asked Albedo, making both members of Ainzal look at her. Momoga got a smirk on her face. Then allow me to put that to the test. Albedo, come here please, said Momoga. Yes, Lady Momoga. Momoga grabbed Albedo by her shoulders and crashed her lips into Albedo's. Yuzukage Naruto's jaw dropped at the actions of his succubus's eyes whitened as her eyes rolled into the back of her head as she experienced an orgasm from her mistress's lips. Yuzukage wasn't blind to how attractive Momoga was, nor was Naruto underestimating how beautiful Sana's personality was. Even so, this was a shock to his system. But it also confirmed that it wasn't a game. Had it been a game on an unmodded deep dive chair, then Momoga would have been stopped from kissing the succubus. Naruto knew for a fact that Sana didn't own a modded DTC. Suddenly a sweet scent filled the air, invading Naruto's nostrils. Was Momoga always that attractive? Was Albedo always so tantalizing? Albedo reached out and grabbed Momoga's breasts. As their tongues fought for control, she was weak in the knees. The only thing keeping her up was the fact that Momoga was holding her waist, and she had a leg wrapped around Momoga's waist. It took her a minute to figure out that she was releasing a powerful pheromones into the air that would affect all males within a 100 meters and of breeding age. She tried to rein it in, but it was hard as Momoga's soft tongue and hand on her breasts were distracting her. Just as she was pulling it in, her control was wrested from her as a large hand roughly groped her ass. Before she knew it, a mouth was attacking her neck with bites. 1. Yuzukage-sama. Moaned Albedo between kisses and tongue licks on Albedo's face. So this is what your ass feels like. It's soft like I always imaged, said Yuzukage, whispering into her ear. With Yuzukage's words, Albedo experienced another orgasm. Oh, how her master and mistress played with her. The orgasm was just enough to knock her into a mini coma. Momoga pulled away from Albedo and licked her lips. Tasty, said Momoga. I wouldn't know since someone keep her lips the entire time, said Yuzukage. Then try her lips for yourself, Yuzukage, said Momoga, licking her lips as her red eyes sparked to life with red flames. Or would you prefer a second-hand kiss of Albedo from me, perhaps later? Right now we have work to do, said Yuzukage. Momoga nodded. You're right as always, Cage. Albedo, go and assemble the floor guardians from. Leaving the guardians of floor 4 and 8. However, bring the 4th floor guardian overseer. We will be on the 6th floor, said Momoga, tilting Albedo's chin and making her look into her beautiful red eye. By your will, Momoga-sama, Yuzukage-sama, said Albedo, managing to gain some composure. Yuzukage and Momoga left the area via teleportation. Location: the Great Tomb of Nazark. Place: the 6th floor. Time: 0020. The duo appeared in the corridor on the 6th floor. What was that, Sana? Asked Naruto, rounding on his friend. I have no idea what you're talking about, said Sana as she was about to walk out of the tunnel. Naruto grabbed her by her arm and pushed her into the wall, before slamming his arm next to her, blocking her escape. Sana frowned. Why is what I did such a problem? Asked Sana. Because there were other ways to test out if we were still in the game. Something as simple as grabbing her hand would have worked. Not to mention how we basically Yuli assaulted Albedo, said Yuzukichi. Momoga crossed her arms under her breasts. Maybe I did take it a bit far. But something as simple as grabbing her wouldn't have been enough to know for sure, said Sana. Bullshit. Growled Naruto. Momoga glared into her friend's eyes. No, it wouldn't have. Least you forget that Yggdrasil treats hand grabs as a form of combat, unless a genital is targeted. Kissing, groping, the fact that Albedo had 2 orgasms within moments of my kiss and your touch gave us all the information that we needed to know, said Sana before she smirked. Besides, you played with her ass, bitter neck. What's that called again? Mate marking. Naruto frowned, before he backed away. While he didn't 100% agree, he did have to admit that he went even further than she did. He had groped Albedo. Something he would have chewed any of his subordinates out about. He would have to be far more careful going forward. You're right. I'm sorry about that, Sana, said Naruto. Don't worry about it. I should have checked with you before I did what I did. Anyway, we need to speak with the twins, said Sana. Also, I don't think I forgot the fact you never gave me an answer to my question. The duo exited the corridor and made their way to the arena. The Colosseum that paid homage to the Roman Colosseum that was constructed during the time of Roman Emperor Vespasian. It sat in the middle of a small desert, but as you got further out you could see the vast forest that surrounded the 6th floor. Blue Planet's pet project. I always forget how breathtaking this place is, said Yuzukichi. Yes. It's hard to believe that it's completely underground, said Momoga. Apart from that, where are the twins? Asked Yuzukichi-sama. Over here. Yelled a voice from the Emperor's booth. A figure jumped down and ran over to the duo. It was a young dark elf. Even though both knew that it was a girl, you'd be hard-pressed to know that at first glance. Or a Debbie Fior. A dark elf. Yuzukichi was sure that she would grow up to be a heartbreaker when she was fully grown. Golden hair and heterochromia, her left eye blue and right eye green. She wears reddish-black dragon scale leather covered by a white and gold vest, embroidered with the guild emblem of Ainzal gown. Below it, she has a matching set of white trousers and gold-plated shoes, and around her neck is an acorn necklace emitting golden light. 2. She quickly bowed to the duo. Momoga-sama, the most beautiful woman in all of Nazarick, and Yuzukichi-sama, a man who all men bow to. I welcome you to the 6th floor, said Or. Momoga let out a quick chuckle. That is quite the elaborate introduction, Or, but I must ask you, where is your brother? Asked Momoga with a hint of playfulness in her red eyes. Or looked around and frowned. Mayor, get over here. Yelled Or. Ni-chan, I can't, it's scary. Yelled a voice. Get over here. You're being rude to Momoga-sama and Yuzukichi-san. Yelled Or. Another figure jumped out of the Emperor's box, but landed on their butt. They quickly got up and ran over. This time it was a young boy. Or Bellafior. He looked just like Or, but insisted of wild hair. His was shaped in a short-style bob cut, blue dragon scale shirt, white vest like his sister's, but instead of a shirt he wore a skirt, stockings and boots. In his hands was a twisted black staff. Yubibuku's children, thought Yuzukichi before sweat dropping. I forgot how much she likes her traps. It's so good to see you, Lady Momoga, Lord Yuzukichi. Forgive my earlier rudeness, said Mayor. Momoga gave a small laugh. All is forgiven. I actually came down here for 2 reasons. One is to shake off the rust I accumulated sitting on my throne. The other is because in just under 20 minutes the other guardians will be here, said Momoga. Or's ears dropped. Does that mean that Sheltier will be here as well? Asked Or. Of course she will. Please try and be civil with her, Or, said Yuzukichi, smiling at the young dark elf. Or sighed, before she ordered some of her Myoins to bring out targets for Momoga. Naruto stood against the wall and watched as Momoga unleashed a few spells before summoning a fire elemental. Or and Mayor then went to work destroying the elemental with ease. During the fight, Naruto's senses picked up a faint aura appearing. Demon Shinobi Commander Onigiri. I don't remember summoning you here, especially when Nazarick is on a level 4 alert, said Yuzukichi in annoyance. A figure appeared kneeling behind Naruto and in the shadows. He was covered in shadows, with the only visible light being his yellow eyes. Forgive me, my lord. I wouldn't have come here from the 9th if it wasn't important. It has to do with what is going on outside of Nazarick, said the shadow. I'm sure Sabas was going to give us the information needed. Why have you come to me on a matter that I would have known about in a few moments? Asked Yuzukichi. This is a separate matter from the one you had Lord Sabas look into, said Onigiri. Now that caught Yuzukichi's ear. Well, he did give Sabas orders. Demon Shadow was part of a group of NPCs that Naruto had created and personally controlled. During their creation, the rest of Ainzal Gown feared the demon shinobis, since they could move, though most of Nazarick undetected, except by a few individuals like the bosses, floor guardians, and supreme beings. An intelligence assassination force. 50 NPCs all at the level of 70, with only the commander and vice commander being higher and level 80. They lived in the 8th floor, the wilderness. Nazaryk's most deadly zone with a job that required them to be there. Protect Oriole Omega in the Cherry Blossom Sanctuary. What is it that you have to report to me, Commander? Asked Naruto. Well, I won't give the details that Saba-sama is going to report. I will say that currently I have 4 squads investigating a total of 10 miles out in all directions. They are recording information and creating a map of the area, said the commander. Yuzukage nodded. Report back to me once all of the squads have returned. Also once they return, start expanding outwards until we have 100 miles mapped in all directions, said Naruto as he kicked off the wall. By your will, Yuzukage-sama, said Onigiri, vanishing back into the shadows. Yuzukage walked over as a gateway opened up and out walked the floor guardian of the 1 to 3 floors, Sheltier Bloodful. A buxom vampire. Described as a true beauty, she has pale shiny skin, seductive crimson red eyes, and fine facial features. Sheltier's silver hair is tied in a ponytail through a large ribbon on top of it all, allowing others a full view of her face. A soft black evening dress with a big heavy skirt. Her upper body is dressed in a lace-embellished ribbon and a short tailored jacket. Her wearing hands are donned with long lace gloves, not exposing any bit of skin exterior. Yuzukage had been to her quarters a few times, and had seen the depravity that Perorancino had done in there. While players could not touch the NPCs in any ill way, it was clear what Sheltier was used for. Following her was the overseer of the 4th floor guardian Shiel. Shiel was a slender yet curvaceous woman with long purple hair and purple eyes. She usually wore a revealing sleeveless lilac cheongsam with detached lilac arm sleeves and white boots. She wore glasses and had a scar on her right cheek. Shiel was a reborn homunculus. She was stronger than the homunculi that acted as maids and butlers of Nazaryk. Those were made of clay, while Shiel was made from the remains of a woman who died fighting for a friend. She was granted the title of overseer of the 4th floor, but not guardian. This was due to 2 factors. The first was that the guardian of the 4th floor was a raid-level boss. Even though he was only leveled at 70, it would take a small army to beat him. Second was the fact that Shiel was probably one of the deadliest fighters in all of Nazaryk. Next came the 5th floor guardian Cocytus, having an enormous body size of 2.5 meters. Cocytus has the appearance of an insect walking on 2 feet, a fusion between a mantis and an ant. But the tail twice as long as his height, Cocytus is covered in sharp spikes like icicles, and has a strong jaw that can easily snap peoples of his hands, hold a silver halberd, while the remaining 2 hands hold a mace emitting black light, and a crooked-shaped sheath, which seems to be for a broadsword. With the breathtaking cold air, the pale blue, hardened bone armor oozes out diamond dust like bright light. His shoulders and back look like uplifted icebergs. Finally came the guardian of the 7th floor Demiurge, a demon with dark skin and nicely combed black hair. Behind the round glasses are eyes so squinted that they are not normally visible. Wearing an orange suit with a tie, dressed like a gentleman, his manner of speaking and way of walking made it clear that he was a force to be reckoned with. Behind his back is a silver tail, covered with metal plates and 6 long spikes at the end. Demiurge was probably the most evil NPC to be created in Nazaryk by human standards. Ward and present yourselves to the rulers of Nazaryk, ordered Momoga. Sheltier dropped to a knee. Sheltier Bloodfallen. Guardian of the 1st, 2nd and 3rd floors, bow before the supreme beings, the most beautiful of all beings in the world, said Sheltier. Shiel dropped to a knee. Shiel of the Broken Mind, overseer of the 4th floor guardian, bow before the supreme beings and my creator. Beings that gave me the life for which I am forever thankful. Koikuts bowed. I Koikuts. Guardian of the 5th floor. Bow before the supreme beings, said the large blue bug. Both Mare and Or fell to a knee. I Or Darby Fiona speak for the Fiona twins, guardians of the 6th floor. We bow before the most mighty of the supreme beings, said Or. Demiurge bowed. I Demige bow before the most wise and powerful of the supreme beings. Albedo followed suit. I Albedo, commander and overseer of the floor guardians, bow before the supreme beings and the 2 people I love with all my heart. We the floor guardians declare our allegiance to Warlord Yuzukage and Overlord Momoga, the most powerful of all the supreme beings, said the guardians together. Momoga looked at the floor guardians, before letting out a small chuckle, that turned into a full belly laugh as she threw her arms wide open. Splendid. I expect nothing less from those who command the denizens of the great tomb of Nazaryk. Yuzukage-kun, would you please give them a rundown of our situation, said Momoga as she summoned a smaller replica of her throne, and took a seat. Yuzukage stepped forward. As you are all no doubt aware, at 0000 hours there was a disturbance in force field that protects Nazaryk from all threats. Upon felling the shifting of our barrier, we ordered Sabas and the demon shinobi to set out and gather information for us. Sabas has his report for us, said Yuzukage. Sabas stepped out from where he stood. Sabas, the head butler of Nazaryk, was an elder gentleman who looked like he was the servant of a noble family. However, his looks made him seem weaker than he really was. Sabas was easily as strong as any of the guardians. Floor guardians, as Yuzukage-sama has stated, the shifting of our barrier was a minor disturbance, but the cause has been found. A teleportation spell was used on the great tomb of Nazaryk. Teleportation. But how? No one, not even the supreme ones, have that kind of power, said Mare. The blast of aura was felt throughout the room as Albedo rounded on Mare. You dare question the strength of our masters, I should cut you down where you stand, yelled Albedo as she summoned her black war axe. Or got between Mare and Albedo and summoned her whip. You will not hurt my brother, you bitch, growled out the little dark elf. Albedo glared at Or. You'd best watch yourself, child, yelled Albedo. Enough, yelled Momoga, flexing her own aura, putting Albedo's to shame. Mare speaks the truth, Albedo. Even as powerful as we are, it takes more than Yuzukage-kun and I to move Nazarick at our current strength. Albedo's eyes whitened before falling to her knees and putting her head on the ground. Forgive me, Lady Momoga. I only meant to enforce your will. Momoga looked at Naruto, who nodded. Albedo, see me after this. We will discuss your overzealous nature then. Shiel, you shall join us, said Yuzukage. Of course, Lord Yuzukage, said both Shiel and Albedo. Sabas continued with his report, detailing how Nazarick was no longer in the Great Swamp but in an open field. Following that, plans were made in how to defend Nazarick. I was decided that Mare would take several earth and nature elementals and turn the open plains into a zone of hills that would make it harder to find Nazarick. Once plans were finished, Momoga left with Naruto taking off to his personal office, with Albedo and Shiel following after him. While normally Albedo would have chastised the oftentimes dim-witted girl, she was Yuzukage's personal creation. The creation that she would not speak back to, especially with the silent rage that was emitting from him. When in the confines of his officer, Yuzukage snapped his fingers as two thin wires flew from the rafters and grabbed Albedo's hands, raising them above her hands. She looked up and saw two demon shinobi standing there, pulling the wires tight enough to draw blood, letting Albedo know that if they so wished they could have taken her hands off. Shiel quickly drew a short sword and cut away Albedo's clothes, leaving her naked for all to see. While the succubus felt no shame in being seen, she didn't want to be seen like this by one of those she loved. Albedo, do you know what your job is? Asked Yuzukage. Hi. In the event that the serpent beings are absent, I am to oversee all denizens of Nazarick and protect them. And yet in a moment of anger at Mare making an observation, you drew your weapon on him, stated Shiel. Albedo's eyes whitened. My lord, I only did what I thought was right, yelled Albedo. And I believe you. However, outside of sparing and a direct insider threat to Nazarick, we do not raise our weapons against our own. It goes against the very idea of Nazarick, said Yuzukage, thinking of how Momoga hated Lucifer. Albedo looked away from the man she loved. She had disappointed him. No, not just him, she had disappointed her lady as well. Forgive me, Lord Yuzukage, said the succubus. I forgive you, but you will not escape your punishment, said Yuzukage as he held out his hand and summoned his staff with a lightning crystal on the back of it. Albedo's eyes whitened. A white lightning rod. Please, Yuzukage-sama, anything but that, pleaded the beauty. The words fell on deaf ears. Yuzukage walked up to Albedo and touched the rod too in between her breasts. Had the walls not been soundproof, her screams would have been heard throughout all of Nazarick. Every nerve was screaming in a Ganji for what felt like hours, but was only a few seconds. Yuzukage removed the rod from hers. Albedo slumped forward, sweat dripping from her body. 1 down, 9 to go, said Yuzukage. Over and over the rod touched her skin, and each subsequent time was worse than the last. Each time brought great agony to Albedo. On the 3rd time she urinated. The urine was ignored as Naruto gave her a minute to breath. This was painful to his heart as well, but it needed to be done. On the 5th time she vomited. By the time the rod touched her, and 8th time she was on the verge of passing out. Once it was finally over, Albedo was released from the wires, and slumped forward where a pair of demon Kunoichi caught her. Her body on the verge of collapse. A burn mark was on her chest and sweat dripped from her body. Well, road Yuzukage, said Albedo as she tried to keep from slipping into unconsciousness. Yuzukage walked up to Albedo and gently touched her face. This was just a warning, Albedo. All of Nazarick are family, and if you hurt this family then you will know pain. You are on probation for the next month, and Sabas will take over your duties as overseer. You will work as his assistant. Should he find your progress wanting, then you will be punished again. Albedo barely had the strength to speak, let alone talk. She knew that she had gotten off easy. I would let it happen again, Yuzukage-sama, my love, said Albedo as she blacked out. Have a pair of maids wash and dress Albedo. Put her to bed. Albedo, I took no pleasure in punishing you. Had you actually harmed Mare, the punishment would have been 10 times worse, said Yuzukage, as the demon Kunoichi took Albedo away. Shiel took a step around the vomit and urine, as a pair of maids came in and began to clean his floor. You regret what you did? Asked Shiel. Yuzukage looked at Shiel. Do you take offense to my actions, Shiel? Asked Yuzukage. Whether I take offense or not, I am but your servant. I am your weapon to deal out punishment however you see fit, my lord, said Shiel. Naruto nodded. Go and get some rest. We have much to do in the coming days, said Yuzukage. 00000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 in truth Ainzal let Albedo and the others run roughshod over him with the way they did things. I get that it was done for comedy in some places, but in others it was downright punishable. But as he is the master of Nazareth, he should have laid down the law. All the NPCs loved him, but feared his wrath. I have never read the light novel or read the manga, but a lot of things that the NPCs did that should have gotten them in trouble. He let off with a warning. Sheltier was the only one he ever punished, but that was stupid, since she fell victim to a world item that she had no defense against. Lupus almost allowed Inferior to die, and all Lanes did was yell at her. Solution should have been lightly punished for making a false report on Sabas. I know Ainz turned it to his advantage, but at the same time he removed a highly skilled piece from the board when he should have just altered his plans and made to earn in Yuvaren part of said plans. Naruto and Momoga will not be that lenient on their subjects when they fail or displease them greatly, but they will reward them for going above and beyond. The term firm but fair applies here. Anyway, see you next time. Momoga sat on top of a cliff with Aplyta's sister Nabil Gemma and Lupus Rigna Beta behind her. Of course Lupus was there to work under Yuzukich for the day while Nate worked for her, but that was splitting hairs at the moment. Barely a week had passed, and it was still determined that Nazarick was to remain at level 4 alert. All of the demon shinobi had been dispatched far and wide to gather whatever information they could. Under the subjection of Daimyuj, 2 off-site bases Manners were under construction, and would both be given under the command of sub-floor bosses. Were it not for Yuzukich backing Daimyuj's play, she would have shut that idea down in a minute. It was risky to say the least, but Yuzukich was the frontline commander for a reason. Over the last week everyone did their part. Even Sana and Naruto. Both would take time to themselves every day, not as the rulers of Nazarick, but just as good friends to just talk and relax. Several times when alone the duo would divert into theory of why they came to this world. The working theory was that it's some type of dimensional magic that had brought them here. Both had already decided that they would rather stay in this world, rather than return to their old world, as actually role-playing as the villains would be fun. Both had also delved into trying to figure out their powers. Sana had quickly discovered that her skills as an Ecormiser translated quite well, as did her racial skills of a Wrath. It helped a lot that Daymags was giving her flying lessons. Of course her training was going much more smoothly than it would seem. Part of it was due to her already instinctively knowing some of her attacks. But then again she wasn't normally on the front lines like Naruto was and was a bit rusty. Speaking of Naruto, no Yuzukich was currently enjoying himself down below in the frozen hell that was the 5th floor. Yuzukich was currently sparring with Cocytus using a tier 3 katana, while Cocytus was using his own tier 6 battle saber, as his halberd, which other was the equivalent of a divine class item. An explosion happened in the middle of the field that they were fighting on, followed by Cocytus flying out and into an ice wall. Naruto held out his hand and created a flaming orb that was surrounded by 3 blades. Flaming Rasen Shuriken, yelled Naruto throwing the attack. Coitus rose out of the wall and raised his saber, slashing the attack in half, forcing it to explode on either side of him, but his saber suffered serious damage as it melted. Cocytus lifted his blade. Not in anger, but in awe of the power of one of his masters. Amazing. To think that your power could damage a saber of this class when you are limiting your own power. My lord, said Cocytus, bowing to his master out of a sense of honor. Yuzukich smiled and sheathed his sword. Think nothing of it, Cocytus. I enjoyed our spar, said Yuzukich, returning the bow. What do you two think of Yuzukich and Cocytus's battle? Asked Momoga as she sipped from the tea that had been provided to her. Master Cocytus was holding his own quite well against Yuzukich-sama, said Nabil. Lupus licked her lips. Yuzukich-sama was quite the force. He can breed me anytime if he can give me pups with even half of his power. Sana Momoga chalked on her tea at that proclamation. Lupus niece, and that is an upright thing to say in front of Momoga-sama. Chastised of the blushing doppelganger, Lupus grinned at her younger sister. But I'm not lying, am I? After all I've heard you in your room. Oh, Yuzukich-sama. You're so big. You're tearing my little body apart. Momoga hummed at this, while Sana blushed. Well, she knew that the current Naruto before wasn't what he really looked like, or rather that was what he looked like now. His avatar wasn't so dissimilar to had he looked like originally. And Momoga-sana could easily admit that Yuzukich Naruto was a rather fetching man. Too bad he'll never give a plain Jane like me the time of day, thought Sana. Location: Great Tomb of Nazarick. Place: the 10th floor. Time: late evening. Yuzukich and Momoga sat in a room with Sabas, Daimyuj and Albedo standing before them. The room was actually rather important to Nazarick's defenses as a whole, as it was the cartography room. An ever-evolving map that Blue Plant had helped create to help in the defense of Nazarick. It helped that the table that held the cartographer was actually a world-class item known as the Endless Map. Paired with the world-class item Orb of Viewing, nothing could get past them. Nothing was out of their sight. Then again, with Yuzukich's primary weapon was pretty damn strong in its own right. You three had something you wished to report to us? Asked Momoga. Hi Momoga-sama, said the trio. Sabas stepped forward, fulfilling his active role of overseer. As we have kept up the alert for the past week, we have kept our patrols roaming for the 5 days, even after Mare has created the false hills that cover Nazarick. I believe that it is safe to reduce the threat level at the moment. What do you think, Yuzukich? Asked Momoga, looking to her friend. Nothing has been found within the walls of our home. I don't see why we can't reduce the threat level, said Yuzukich. Momoga nodded. Very well. The threat level is reduced to level 1 unless absolutely necessary. Demiegg, I need a full report on the things that the demon shinobi and our patrols have found by the end of the day. At that point I want all Guardians except for Victim and Gargantua to come to a meeting with me, said Momoga. Hi, I will ensure that it is done, laddie, said Demiurge. Albedo, get ready to depart, said Yuzukich. Lord, asked Albedo. I've been cooped up in here too long while visiting the lake and 6 floors nice. I need to starch my legs. There was a village about 10 kilometers away. I want you and Shield to accompany me as my personal guard, said Yuzukich. Momoga turned to Yuzukich and raised a brow. Is that wise? Asked Momoga. The information that the demon shinobi can provide is limited to the things that they hear and see. They can't do everything. Sometimes that requires a hands-on approach, said Yuzukich with a smirk on his face. How long were you expecting to be gone, my lord Yuzukich? Asked Sabas. A day or so. 10 kilometers isn't much, but I'm always expecting the unexpected, said Yuzukich. Momoga nodded. Please be careful, Yuzukich, said Momoga. I can't afford to lose you, Sana said silently to herself. Location. Great Forest of Top. Place. Path leading to Karn Village. Time. Noon. The Great Forest of Top was a dense woodland that saw several creatures living in it. The humans of the little village that sat at the open plains to the most northern section of the forest had little to fear from the likes of the deerwolves and other assortment of creatures, so long as the wise king was there. However, the threat of man still existed, as the people of Karn Village learned. 2 girls dashed through the woods at an alarming rate as a pair of soldiers chased after them, swords drawn and ready to kill. A blonde-haired beautiful girl in her late teens to early 20s, and a red-haired girl who was barely approaching her 10th summer of life. The red-haired girl tripped and fell to the ground. Nemu, yelled the older girl as she covered her sister as a sword slash opened her back up, relishing a spray of blood. Henry, yelled Nemu. Henry gave her sister a pained girl. I'm fine, you need to run, said Henry. Nemu shook her head in the negative. We already lost Mama and Papa. I'm not going to lose you too, yelled Nemu. Then you can die together, you little whores, yelled one of the men, raising his sword to strike. Will-o-wisp, said a voice. The man went up in purple flames. He yelled in pain as he began to roll on the ground to put out the flames. His partner looked at him in complete and utter fear. It's no use. Well, Will-o-wisp is only a Tear Force spell. It is quite difficult to put out without a counter spell or charm, said a man. Henry and the surviving soldier turned and looked at the source of the voice. Henry blushed upon seeing the man's majestic features. The other man blushed looking at the 2 beauties that were with the man. If he could kill the man, if he could capture them and take them back to sell to some of the nobles though. Before he could finish his thoughts, the purple-haired beauty removed from her back a pair of shears, vanished, and reappeared cutting his head off. Trash, like you shouldn't think such thoughts about Yuzukich-sama and Albedo-sama, said the woman, her glasses concealing the deadly glint in her eyes. What should we do about them, Yuzukich-sama? Asked Albedo, heating her battle axe over her shoulder. Yuzukich turned to the 2 girls, who both looked at the man in awe. He reached his hand out and summoned a vial of blood. This freaked both girls out a little. Yuzukich kneeled before them. Drink this and it shall heal your back, said Yuzukich. And he hesitantly took the vial and drank it. Well, it didn't taste bad, it didn't taste good either. Within seconds the pain was gone and her skin, muscle, and tendons knitted themselves back together. Yuzukich raised a brow at the way healing working. Since they had played in a game, all it did before was replenish their health bar. Here it cured the entire ailment. Sana would like to know this. Are there any more men like that? Asked Yuzukich. Yes. In our village just up the road, said the blonde. Yuzukich raised his hand and created a barrier over the girls. Nothing as sophisticated as Momoga could create, but it would do. He thought about it for a second before pulling out 3 whistles. Stay inside of the barrier and you shall be safe. 2 of the whistles will summon a horde of goblins, the 3rd will summon a golem to you. We will return shortly, said Yuzukich. The trio turned and sprinted down the path to head to the village. Location. Karn Village. Place. Village Elder's house. Time. Noon. The 4th son of the noble family of Ulba wanted to yawn in boredom. Here he was overseeing the looting of a village for the king and country on the orders of his superiors, with nothing to show for it. Sure, a few dead here, a trinket or 2 there, and the only good-looking girl had escaped. Normally his troops didn't touch the females of villages for fear of reprisal from his superiors, but they had been given a clean slate this time around. Already a few of his men were partaking of the spoils. Then again, their whole goal was the assassination of the head warrior. A man who was said to have 1,000 kills under his belt. If there was a good chance they were going to die, then he and his men would partake of all they could. Sir, yelled a Sulite running over to him. What is it? Asked the noble's son. In the village square. A trio of travelers. 2 of them quite beautiful, said the soldier. The son looked at him with a raised brow. Beautiful was quite tough to pull off. Even several of the noble ladies of the court were not all that agreeable with their looks. He jumped up and followed after the man to the village square. Once there he saw the people that they had rounded up, the dead, and the trio of travelers surrounded by his men. The women were both beautiful, with one of them having horns. A demonkin of the old wars perhaps. Rare and quite valuable. The purple-haired woman. Also beautiful. more so than even his last conquest was. Something worthwhile to play with before giving to his men. The last one, amen. Handsome features definitely of noble birth, but those foxtails. Beaskin. Something that would see many young women in love with his features. Men, capture them alive if you can, don't hurt them too badly, said the fourth son. Disgusting, said the purple-haired woman. I agree with you, Shield-san. Yuzukage-sama, what is you will? Asked the horned woman. Kill them all, but please keep the damage to the village at a minimum, said Yuzukage. The son opened his mouth to speak, but didn't get far, as in less than a minute his entire platoon of 70 men was all but wiped out, leaving him as the lone survivor. It all happened so fast that his eyes couldn't even keep up. All he saw was blood, guts, and limbs flying. The fourth son staggered backwards and hit the ground. Monsters. Hellspawn. Deathliers of the earth. Yelled the man. Silence. Yelled Yuzukage. The inn fell silent to Yuzukage's commanding voice. Listen to the words about to come out of my mouth. You are to ride to meet your commander, bring him here alongside every soldier that falls under his command, and know that Yuzukage, frontline commander and second in command of Nazark, is waiting for him, said Yuzukage. The fourth son was so scared at this point that he ended up defecating on himself, before he managed to get up and run away, before getting on a horse and fleeing. Shadow follow, said Yuzukage as part of his shadow detached and followed after the son. Yuzukage turned and looked at the rest of the people in the village, many of whom looked at him in mixture of awe and fear. Naruto let out a silent sigh. Story of my freaking life. Yuzukage aka Uzumaki Naruto found it strange that he was once again transported to another world for the second time in his life. That's right. Being transported inside of a game was not the first time he had been. What was the word that they used? Iseki'd. Yeah, iseki'd away to a new world. To understand we'd have to go back about 137 years. Uzumaki Naruto was born on October 10th year 210 after Sasuke. To the fourth leader of the village Namikaze Minato, and the last known member of the village of Edding Tides Uzumaki Kushina. The village had been attacked by the Kyuubi no Kitsune and a masked man calling himself a Chihamadar. But it was all a plot within a plot within a plot. But we'd be here all day if Naruto jumped into that rabbit hole. Because of Kurama, that was the Kyuubi's name, Naruto was treated like a peer of the village. Ignored with the occasional death threat and harassment, but he made it though it. By the time he was 16, the elemental nations were involved in the 4th Great Shinobi War, which the allied shinobi forces of the 5 great villages won. Following this was an era of tense peace, since the very nature of shinobi was conflict. When Naruto turned 25 he was appointed as the Hokage, the leader of his entire village. And strangely enough the council had asked Naruto to procreate with several females to revive the Uzumaki clan. Of course he refused, stating that he was happy to be married to Hyuga Hinata, with the occasional playtime with his sister-in-law, who didn't plan on having kids. That didn't stop him from having kids with others though. He had a son who was named Arashi with Kazuhana Koyuki, the daimyo of Spring Country, and a pair of twin daughters with the priestess of Demon Country Shion, with each girl getting named after their mothers. By the time Naruto was 70 his second apprentice Sarada had ascended to the throne, and had become the 9th Hokage of Konoha, after his first apprentice and grandson of the 3rd Hokage. After years of battles, watching his children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren grow, and playing politics, Naruto grew tired and just enjoyed the last years of his life in peace. Naruto ended up allowing his body to die, following after Hinata nearly 2 years on his wife, died on his 99th birthday. Instead of following his wife to the Pure Lands, he was instead pulled by an unknown power to a world that had been destroyed by humanity's foolishness. Over the years there he remembered everything about his life, turned it into a book series, he had gotten a degree in ecology, and started trying to fix the world. He had managed to create several geofronts, water labs that would clean water, and several air purifiers. Thanks to his effects the people didn't have to go out in full suits, but still had to use full breathers still. And all this before he was 30 years old in this new world. Following the expansion of his company he discovered the game Intersil. He researched and joined up with the game, going with the Kitsune race with the assassin class. He had played as a solo player for a long time, before he ran into Touch Me and Momoga and created a clan Ainzal gown. The rest, as they say, is history. Yuzukage Dono, are you alright? Said the village elder. Yuzukage was snapped out of his memories. After the fight with those soldiers he had decided that he wasn't killing anyone for free, and asked for information on the surrounding area and kingdoms. Of course this was well after the village was allowed to mourn and bury their dead. When he had discovered the continent was divided into several human kingdoms, with the strongest being the Empire. So full of themselves that was all they called themselves. From all the information that he was able to gather there were about 5 human kingdoms and a dwarf kingdom, the slain theocracy more called then kingdom, and the dragon kingdom. I'm fine. Just lost in thought. So older Sama, where does Karn village fall in all of this? Pointing to the map he saw that they were at the edge of the Riesti's kingdom. Yuzukage studied this for a moment. Easily the one kingdom that was too close for comfort. But looking at the map there were several cities in between the capital and Karn village. Ainzal was the most direct path from Karn and Azur to the capital. The duo would spend the next several hours going over information. By the time they had finished speaking, Shield came into the room and bowed to Yuzukage. Yuzukage-sama, several men on horseback have entered my detention range, said Shield. No way, that fool lost my shadow. As they are still a half a day's ride out from here, said Yuzukage. They will be here within the hour, said Shield. Yuzukage nodded. Understood, said Yuzukage as he touched his ear. Momoga, can you hear me? Asked Yuzukage. Hi, I can. Did something happen? Asked Momoga, worry slipping into her voice. I'm fine. I'm going to transfer some information to you. Data transfer, said Yuzukage. Yeah, yelled Sana over the link. Are you alright? Asked Naruto. I'm fine. It was just a little strange to feel that information dump in my head. We'll have to reserve data transfer for emergencies. But everything that you sent me is quite fascinating. This empire, they have access to deadly weapons. We're going to have to send a spy to there, one step at a time, Momoga. Let me deal with this problem here, said Yuzukage. Very well. Once you finish up there, come home, Naruto. I miss you, said Sana. Before Naruto could respond, the connection was cut. It was hard to keep up with who was speaking at times. Momoga, the leader of Ainzal, Gauner, Sana, the salary woman who had been Naruto's friend for well over a decade. They had met in person a few times. During the Ainzal Gauner party, at the bar with their good friends Touch Me, Bikubiku Chigama, and Paoran Sino, and even the times they went to the bars alone. Even the one time they. Lord Yuzukage, said Albedo. Yuzukage turned to Albedo. What is it, Albedo? They're here, said Albedo. Yuzukage rose to his feet and summoned his Ninjato and Kadachi, and put them on the left side of his hip in his belt. Naruto turned to the elder. Elder-sama, I will need you to accompany me to the main gate, so we may smooth over any misunderstandings, said Yuzukage. Of course, Yuzukage Dono, said the elder, walking behind the kitsune. Location: Karn Village. Place: Gates of the Northern Road. Time: late afternoon. Azastronov was born a poor man on a frontier village of Riestai's kingdom. During his teenage years he would become a mercenary and train under a former Domtite-ranked adventurer, before becoming a member of the kingdom's army. It took only a few years to work his way up the ranks, and become the head warrior, leader of all of the kingdom's forces, with his own warrior attack force, that answered directly to the king. Of course he had political enemies in the nobles and other factions of the kingdom courts. In the 10 years he had served the kingdom he had fought in countless battles and killed countless more men who opposed the king. So it was a surprise head warrior who was met at the front gate by who he assumed was a village elder, a woman decked out in full armor with large black wings, another woman wearing glasses with a large pair of shears, and a spear creature, if Gazif was sure of what he was looking at. He gave the order to his people, and they spread out, forming a defensive perimeter. Gazif dismounted from his horse and approached with his guard up, but not putting his hand near his blade. The creature walked up as well, but unlike Gazif, his guard was lowered. Arrogance perhaps. The creature stopped just outside of blade distance. Judging by his 2 blades he was a trained swordsman, but the noble families of the countries to the far east were known to wear blades upon their belts to show their status. Was this creature half human or simply blessed? May I have the pleasure of knowing who I am speaking with? Asked Gazif. The creature smiled. Where I'm from it's common courtesy to give your name first, but we're not in my country. My name is Yuzukage. If you require an epithet, I am Lord of the 9 Great Beasts. Beside me are my 2 companions, Shield of the Rending Shears and Albedo the Succubus Queen. If Gazif wasn't on his guard before, he was now. Succubi, while not the strongest of creatures, they could still be quite formidable when cornered. As far as he knew, there were 4 ranks of succubus in mature, arch, and queen. The last time a queen had been seen, it had taken an adventurer of Orichalcum rank to kill her. And that was 40 years ago. I'm Gazif Stronov, head warrior of the kingdom of Riestais, said Gazif. A pleasure, Gazif Dono. Not that long ago we were in pitched combat with soldiers, so forgive us for our current state of wariness, said Yuzukage. Gazif smiled. Funny, I was thinking that you were invaders, said Gazif. I'm not, but the invaders you were thinking of have already closed ranks around the village. Or at least the routes of escape to the south, said Yuzukage. But that's what would be tour had Momoga not already positioned several skeleton warriors to strike and kill them, once they knew for sure who the target was. The 2 warriors would spend the next several hours getting the villagers to safety and speaking about small things, or at least small to Gazif. Yuzukage was feeding all of the information to Demiege and Momoga. By the time twilight was rolling around, the village had been surrounded, and Gazif and his men had come up with a plan to confront what had been identified as the slain theocracy. They had even discovered that the head warrior was the real target, and the village was just a bait to lure him. Just before Gazif and his squadron set off, Yuzukage gave him a gift. It took 30 minutes for the item to active. A testament to the head warrior's strength. Once Yuzukage, Shield, and Albedo arrived at the battlefield, they took a good look around. Yuzukage snorted. It was a bunch of magic casters and angels of the flame. How he hated enemy magic casters with a passion. It had nothing to do with the spells themselves. No, it had more to do with the fact that if it wasn't for his being part spirit, then magic would be his greatest bane. Who in the devil are you? Asked the leader with a scar. My name is Yuzukage, and since the head warrior got bored playing with you, I'll be taking his place, but first I need some information from you, said Yuzukage. Attack! Yelled the scared priest. Two angels flew at Yuzukage at a speed that would have been impressive to anyone else, but not to the frontline commander of Ainzal. Quickly drawing both his blades, he destroyed the angels. Before the other angels could do anything, Shield and Albedo made quick work of him. Several of the magic casters launched attackers at Yuzukage and the others, but they dealt so little damage. One foolish man raised his hand and threw a stone at Yuzukage, only to lose his head in an explosion of blood and bone. What the hell? Asked the scared priest. Albedo, what was unnecessary? The level of force you used could have blown up a mountain, said Yuzukage. Albedo turned to Yuzukage. Forgive me, my lord, but there is a prerequisite for fighting one such as yourself and Momoga-sama. I must agree with Lady Albedo, my lord. These vermin barely qualify, said Shield. Yuzukage chuckled. Please, both of you. It would take 1,000 lifetimes for them to qualify in your eyes, said Yuzukage. Enough, yelled the scared priest. Principality of Observation. Crush this whelp with your divine powers. The largest angel raised its mace to attack Yuzukage, but Shield appeared in front of her creator and blocked the attack. How dare you try and kill my creator, and with such a weak attack? Yelled Shield. Pushed the mace back. She jumped into the air and cut the Principality of Observation in half. The scared priest clutched his hand in annoyance. That is fourth tier magic spell of summoning. But it seems you are worthy of my most powerful magic as given to me by the archbishop, yelled the scared priest. Yuzukage raised a brow at this. The crystal seemed familiar. Albedo, Shield, be on guard, said Yuzukage. Hi Yuzukage-sama, said the two women as they took up defensive positions in front of their leader. Behold, Dominion authority, yelled the scared priest. It can't be, said Yuzukage seemingly in fear. The scared priest smirked at Yuzukage. That's right, behold the might of the strongest angel. With power equivalent to a 7th tier magic spell, the angel that defeated a demon god single-handedly 200 years ago. It took 150 mages of the sunlight scripture to create a creature that our gods could do with ease. Shut up, said Yuzukage. The joy and elation that the scared priest felt evaporated like water in a desert. The demon before him should have felt fear, he should have felt terror. He should be begging for his life. Incity told him. Himnigan Grid Lewin, captain of the sunlight scripture, to shut up. Albedo and Shield both let out laughs. I can't believe I asked you both to be on guard for such a weak enemy, laughed Yuzukage. Enough. Feel the power of the slain theocracy. Divine judgment, yelled the scared priest. The massive spear inside of the angel's hands broke apart before forming a spear of light that slammed into Yuzukage. Yuzukage stood there taking the attack. Nigan smirked, thinking that he couldn't move, but then the laughing started. Not a laugh of pain, but a laugh of amusement. A laugh that told him how embarrassed he was of their pitiful attempts at harming him. There was not a scream on him. It was useless. When the light died down, Yuzukage stood there shaking slightly. So this is pain. How many years has it been since something hurt me? This numbness, this shaking. How dare you? Yelled Albedo as Shield was shacknecked beside her in rage. How dare you harm a single hair on Lord Yuzukage's head? I'll kill you all. Albedo, Shield, both of you calm down, said Yuzukage. Albedo turned to Yuzukage. But Lord Yuzukage, they hurt you, the person I love most of all. Albedo-sama. Please, you're embarrassing yourself, said Shield. Yuzukage took a step forward, catching everyone's attention. Sorry to say, but I'm quite bored and need to return to my home. I'll end this in a single blow. Void Rasengan, said Yuzukage as a black spinning orb appeared in his hand. Yuzukage vanished and appeared above the angel, before slamming it in the angel's body, and absorbed it into nothingness. Yuzukage landed on the ground, and turned to the girls. They got their orders beforehand. The air that was once filled with holy energy seemed to vanish as the skin returned to the darkness of the night. A minute later the air creaked. What was that? Asked Nigan. It seems that someone was monitoring us. Or at least tried to. If I had to guess, it was your superiors, said Yuzukage. They were watching, said Nigan. Ha 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 ha. They expected you to defeat the head warrior. The man known as the strongest warrior in all of the kingdoms, said Naruto. And who in the hell do you think you are? Yelled Nigan. Albedo slammed her axe into the ground. Quitworm. You are addressing the strongest warrior in all of Nazareth. Commander of the frontline teams when we go to war, and the only man strong enough to claim my body for his own. Lord Yuzukage. Yelled Albedo. Yuzukage-sama, there is no need to keep this filth alive anymore, said Shield. Yuzukage put a hand on his chin. Only leave a handful alive to spread the name of Ainzal, said Yuzukage. The scratching of quill on paper was the only sound in the large office. Momoga leaned forward in her seat and looked at the paperwork. It had been a day since Yuzukage had sent his report back to her with Albedo. She had read it and reread it several times at this point that she had memorized it. Of course Yuzukage wouldn't be back for another day or so. Something to do with the empire that was so arrogant that they didn't have a proper name. Raising from her seat, she turned to the homunculus maid that was attending her. Foss. The young woman looked shocked that Momoga knew her by name. Yes, Milady. Leave me. I wish to be alone for a while, said Momoga as she placed a hand on her desk. The maid bowed. Yes, Milady, said the maid as she walked to the door and walked out. Once alone, the vestige of Momoga dropped and only Sana remained. The once salary woman turned queen of her own evil empire, turned to the mirror that was in her office and looked at herself. Sana raised her hand and created a doppelganger, only the doppelganger wasn't her current self. It was her former self. A taller than average woman with shoulder-length dark brown hair, pulled into a ponytail, her only unique feature being her intense black eyes. This was the salary woman who spent all her money on rent, food, and games. The woman who turned down several offers for dates, mixers, and the like. The woman who was only good enough for one-night stands and the very rare threesome. Sana had never been a Yamato Nadeshiko beauty like her mother was, having inherited more of her father's plain features. While not a stunning beauty, she had been better than plain. She had never been smart enough to make it into the top 50 of her class, but was clever enough to get several grants to attend college. It had been during a low point in college that she wanted to surrender it all. Her grades were slipping, her friends all but abandoned her. She was all alone, and it was looking like a swift end by jumping off a building was preferable. But then it happened. She had found Idrisil and instantly fell in love. Of course, with how the game worked, she quickly discovered how bad things could get. The danger of attacks, humanoid players, outright racism, picking on a daily basis. It was like the old Minecraft server 2B2T, almost anything went. Upon creation of her account, she found herself in hot water with a demon hunting party. While they couldn't touch her, they didn't make things easy by telling her the things they would do to her avatar's body if they could. Before they could pre-mod trap her at their base, she was saved by the non-human players Takumi and Yuzukichi. Both players who had participated in the Idrisil 1v1 tournament. Touch Me had bested Yuzukichi in the finals. Yuzukichi had been fine with that, and following that they formed a party that would become most feared. Upon rescuing her, they asked her to join up with them. Sana Momoa instantly agreed, only to be close to the two men who had saved her life. Following this, the trio became close, and the founders of the then clan Ainzal Gown, and the subsequent guild Ainzal Gown. Of course, over the subsequent years she had come to form connections with the rest of the guild. Dukubiku Chiguma was like her little sister, Piranachino was her best friend alongside Touch Me, then there was Yuzukichi, the person she had fallen head over heels for. Not the avatar, not the frontline commander, but the man behind all of that. She didn't know when she fell for Yuzukichi. No Uzumaki Naruto. A man she had only ever met 8 times earlier. The man that she worked for. Indirectly, of course, as she was middle management and didn't speak directly with the big wigs of Uzumaki Industries. The last time Naruto and Sana had met it had been just after, no. She pushed that memory down and locked the cellar door with chains. She had called him to her apartment. She was drunk, she was tired, and she had been crying about her lack of love life. When Naruto arrived, he got drunk with her. He lamented about the fact that despite his wealth and influence, he didn't care for it. He was surrounded by yes men all day, women that wanted to get into his wallet through his pants, and fighting with other businesses and politicians that didn't give one damn about fixing the world, only holding on to their fleeting power. He spoke about his dead wife and children. Something she knew about, but had never tried to bring up for fear of what it would lead to. The duo brooded over the alcohol, sharing their loneliness with each other. What did two drunk and lonely people do? They didn't make love. They didn't confess undying love for each other. They had raw, unrelenting passion. The feeling of his muscle back under her fingernails as he buried himself in her over and over again, while she bled his back with her nails. The amount of times he released inside of her would have seen her pregnant were it not for her birth control regiment. How she loved every second of his raw passion, the powerful arms that gripped her tightly. It was almost perfect. The only thing that had hurt her was that he whispered his dead wife's name instead of her the last time he had come inside of her. She hadn't been angry, not really, but it still stung somewhat to hear his wife's beautiful name uttered for her plain-looking self. Even to this day, despite knowing that it was two lonely souls that just needed to be lost in each other for only a moment. When it was all over and she woke up late the next morning and was worried she was going to get fired. Naruto had just called her manager, her boss, and her boss's boss, and told them that she was in a meeting with him, and would be for the rest of the day. Sana had actually been somewhat enraged that he would use his position of power to get her out of trouble, but then again she couldn't say anything, since they spent the rest of the day like the extinct rabbits of Earth. Everywhere. Her living room, her shower, her kitchen, her bedroom. Everywhere. God's the amount of fluids left in the house. After that, the next day, well later, Naruto had left and Sana was back at work. They didn't think about it, they didn't talk about it. It was as if it never happened. Or at least that's what Sana wanted to believe. Every time they spoke afterwards, there is a lingering feeling, a touch here, a subtle word there. Shaking her head of the past, she looked at herself in the mirror and frowned. She removed her clothes and armor. The armor, robes, and even most of her rings she wore was divine class and easily her favorite things. Most of her equipment augmented her powers by probably 23 to 30%. She searched through her inventory in her head and quickly ground what she was looking for. a revealing set of robes that had slits up her right leg stopping at her hip, thigh-high boots with a golden trim, a large pointed hat with hat, 2 leather belts that crisscrossed on her white hips, and a wooden staff made from elder wood with a red orb in the center. To finish off her look, she changed her hair from the silver white it was to a shimmering black, and finally her skin was a shade or two darker than it was Earl. Oh wait. She was in the new world. A shade or two darker than her old skin tone was. And she put a small glamour over her eyes that turned them blue. She raised her hand and vanished from her room, intent on getting some fresh air. Location: Great Tomb of Nazareth. Place: First floor. Time: well after midnight. Demiurge was probably the most evil SOB in Eric. Even the lore in his header, his life story made it that way. As an imp spawn he had been weak, even compared to his siblings. He was beaten day in and day out, but he wasn't powerful. Not like the greater imp his mother was, a slave to lesser demon in this small territory, barely 100 kms that it controlled. He was one of that thing's spawn. While he wasn't strong he was smart. Dangerously so. He quickly learned that one wasn't born into power, one earned power. To gain power he devoted book after book, spell after spell, enemy after enemy. And before he knew it he had killed the master of the territory and became the new lord of it, but that wasn't enough. He needed more. Before he realized it he was on the level of a greater demon. But it didn't last. One day he met Albert and swore to follow him and the other 41 supreme beings to the gates of hell themselves if they desired. Of course that was all programming in his mind, but Demiurge and the others of Nazareth didn't really think too much on it. It was just there. To them, regardless of the pasts that they had, the supreme ones would always be their gods. Today Demiurge was with 3 of his evil lords. Envy, Greed, and Wrath patrolling the first, second, and third floor as a favor to Sheltier, who had ventured out on this night with 2 of her brides to feed. Not from Crane Village, no, but from another village that was probably 20 miles east of northeast to find on a few unlucky settlers. But to be perfectly honest, Sheltier was far from his mind truthfully. In truth it was his mistress, Lady Momoga, that occupied his thoughts. She had been locked up in her quarters and by extension the lower levels for several days. It had a lot to do with Lord Yuzukage. While love was a foreign concept to demons such as himself, the art of mating was not. Albedo and her sisters were the types of demons who could fall in love. Since he rarely interacted with the other 2 sisters, he didn't know if they were succubi or not, but from the way Albedo reacted to the touches of the Lord and Lady, he was fairly sure that she had been chosen as breeding stock for Lord Yuzukage. And unlike Lady Momoga, that was all she would be, a warm body for their lords to sate their lust. Of course that was all denizens of Nazareth. They were there for the will of their lords. And that brought up another question. What was their lady and lord's will? Demiurge knew that they were deterred to protect the legacy of Ainzal Gown. But there had to be more. Lord Yuzukage and Lady Momoga can't just be content to hide away. No, it's not that simple. Lord Yuzukage left a few days ago to look at a human village. What are they planning? The demon thought to himself. He stopped as he sensed a massive flow of mana coming from below. He waved his evil lords over and positioned them in a fighting position, ready for whatever it was. As he saw the person he felt a fool for not realizing that it was his lady. He gave the mantle order for his evil lords to stand down, before he fell to a knee with them following suit. Lady Momoga, said Demiurge. Demiurge? What are you doing on the first floor? Asked Momoga. I am covering for Sheltier while she and her brides feed on a nearby human population. Of course, with Sheltier being a Draculina, her thirst must be quite powerful, said the demon. Lady Momoga put a chin on her hand. So that was why she requested to go out on that scouting mission. Sneaky little blood-sucking bitch. Pierre, you would be proud of her, thought a grinning Momoga. I authorized Sheltier and her brides to leave for the day. They had been looking a bit thirsty the last few days. A dead human or 2 isn't a problem in this world, lied Momoga, clear though her teeth. The demon wanted to ask why. To him it made little sense to have arguably the strongest floor guardian away from her post. Then again, Lady Momoga was benevolent to those under her. Who was he to argue her decisions? Demiurge smiled. Always thinking of those under her. What an amazing woman you are, Lady Momoga, said Demiurge. Momoga smiled. Thank you for your kind words, but I have matters to attend to, said Momoga as she took a step. Lady Momoga, surely you don't plan to leave without a proper escort? Asked Demiurge out of concern for his mistress. That was the point of the disguise, so that I may move freely without alerting everyone, said the Queen of Nazareth. Then Ayn said you take no less than 3 guards with you for your protection, said Demiurge. Saw an aside in her mind. She had wanted to avoid this. Spend just 1 bloody hour alone outside the walls of Nazareth. She knew that any attempt to leave without alerting the floor guardians or anyone from Nazareth would end in disaster. An idea hit her. Clever as she was able to pull it off at all. That would be unwise. The defense of Nazareth is our #1 priority, even above minor Yuzukage's safety. However, I will allow you to escort me out, said Momoga. Demiurge smiled. He quickly gave the mental command to his forces and left with Monaga. They walked out the halls in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Once they came to the entrance of Nazareth, Momoga raised her hand and used her authority as guildmaster to open the gates. Once out in the open, Momoga admired the night sky. So clear a few clouds, but not the noxious ones she was used to. No threat of black rain. No fear of poison should the sky open up. She closed her eyes and took a whiff of the air. Clean, beautiful air. Nothing like the rancid toxic air of her home dimension. This was beautiful. Reaching into her pocket dimension and took out a small winged crystal and put it around her neck. Fly, she said, as she became weightless. She took her staff and side-mounted it as a witch in old stories would and took off. Demiurge grew a large pair of leathery bat wings and followed his mistress. The duo soared several hundred feet into the air before stopping. A full moon was out tonight. Momoga stopped first and admired the moon. She reached her hand out and couldn't help but smirk. Well, the sixth floor had been Blue Planet's pet projects to see something of a restored world, if only in a video game. Nothing could beat the real thing. Yuzukage and Blue Planet had been good friends. Then again, Blue Planet was an executive of Uzumaki Industries and worked closely with Yuzukage. Almost as closely as Buka did. Lucky Bitch was part of their media games division as a voice actress. It didn't hurt that she was quite pretty Earl. But that was an old gripe. No, this moment her thoughts were on the druid spirit. Blue Planet-san. You would have loved this. I hope that you are continue your noble work to restore the planet, thought Momoga. The sky is so beautiful. It's on another level compared to the sixth floor, said Momoga. The stars in the sky are glittering like a box of jewels. I believe that this world shines so that my lady and lord might adorn yourselves with its riches, said Demiurge after he caught up to her. Momoga-sana snickered for a moment before she let out a laugh, loud and belly-achingly so. It took a full minute for her to calm down. That may be so, Demiurge. Yuzukage and I may have come to this land to obtain this box of treasures, said Momoga-sana with a fondness in her voice for Yuzukage's name. The treasures of this world are not something we should hoard for ourselves. Perhaps this is so we can adorn Nazark and my comrades of Ainzal gown with it. Demiurge bowed to his lady. If that is what Melody wished, we will use the forces of Nazark to obtain it all for you and Lord Yuzukage. Momoga let out a light unladylike snort, as her grandmother would have called it. At this point we don't know what really exists out there, said Momoga, taking a moment before she looked up at the moon again, her eyes low and glowing slightly in the moonlight. But then again, taking over the world might be enjoyable. Momoga missed it with her back turned to him, but Demiurge gasped. Sana shook her head. As if we could ever pull something like that off, thought the salary woman in her. Now he understood. Lord Yuzukage leaving on scouting missions. Shaltier being allowed to leave to feed the shadows that had been sent out across the lands. It all made sense now. He had been too blind to understand his master and mistress's intent. But now he understood. He got it. Lady Momoga, the guild master of Ainzal gown, and Lord Yuzukage, the frontline commander of Ainzal gown. The strongest magic caster and the strongest hand-to-hand fighter. The Kitsune of Nine Tails and the Wrath of Beautiful Madness. The ultimate power couple. They had kept quiet about it until it was such a time to reveal it, but Demiurge knew what it was. Their secret. Lady Momoga and Lord Yuzukage were going to take over the world. The cool night air was amazing. The gentle breeze brought it with its smells and sensations that she never smelt in the old world. There her senses of smell and ability to move and think beyond combat was limited. Forced. Here all her senses were unmuted. It made her want to scream and run in joy, unleash the true beast within. But she could wait. Raising her head, she glanced at the large celestial body that was currently at its apex in the river of stars. The moon was high in the sky. Barely a day since the last full moon, but then again the moon was perfectly full 3 times a month. Lupus, Regina Beta, or Lupus to her sisters, stood watch in the courtyard that night. The beautiful werewolf of the Palladius sisters. Lupus was a dark-skinned beauty, stood at 5'7", and well, not the bustiest, with only a modest C-cup bust. Compared to the likes of Yuri Alpha or Solution Epsilon of the sister, she was the most athletically built, and red hair tied in 2 long braids. Wearing a modified maid uniform with short sleeves and long black gloves with a skirt that has a long slit on its left side, revealing thigh-high white stockings. She is equipped with an imposing black and silver scepter slung across her back. Lupus would be the first to admit that she was quite lazy and hated serving anyone who wasn't a supreme being. She even had a slight annoyance at serving the floor guardians, even though they were her direct superiors. No, it was more apt to say that the Palladius sisters were the supreme being's personal attack force, specialized for the defense of the throne room. Of course that wasn't her current duty. Her current duty was to watch for Lord Yuzukage. He had been gone longer than expected. Lupus frowned at this. Lord Yuzukage, in her mind as well as the others' minds, was the perfect mate. His power was awe-inspiring. His presence dominating, his personality and looks perfect. The fact that he was a spirit and a beast at that, set her loins on fire, and basically triggered her urge to mate and give him a litter of strong pups. But she couldn't be the first to give him pups. There was a pecking order at the moment. First was Lady Momoga. Regardless of if she knew it or not, she was practically eyeing Lord Yuzukage. Lupus was sure that they would end up mating soon. Next came Lady Albedo. The succubus was easily going to be Lord Yuzukage and Lady Momoga's bed warmer. Probably give them both at least 3 daughters if the rumors of an succubus queen getting pregnant by females as well as males was true. Next up was Lady Sheltier. That little lowly vampire. Lupus's hackles raised thinking of that little bitch. While she did respect the floor guardian, her seeming dislike was more incensed in her DNA than anything. Vampires and lichens, the true name of her race, and not just the human feared term werewolf, were ancient enemies, streaming from the fact that at one point in their history, lichens were slaves to vampires. Lupus shook her head. This wasn't the time to revisit old rivalries. Outside of those three at the very top of the pecking order, it would most likely be fair game. Of course she planned on giving Lord Yuzukage as many pups as he wanted. Lupus drew her weapon and swung it behind her, only for it to be caught between the forefinger and thumb of Lord Yuzukage, who was smiling at her. Lupus gasped in horror. She had attacked Lord Yuzukage. She quickly backpedaled and bowed. "My lord. Please forgive me for attacking you." Yuzukage looked at Lupus with a smirk on his face. "It's fine, Lupus. You didn't realize that I had arrived until it was too late. I used one of my skills to appear as quickly as I did," said Yuzukage. "Understood, my lord." Lady Momoga told those on watch to report the moment you arrived. She also explained that you were to report to her quarters the moment you returned, said Lupus. Yuzukage nodded as he reached into his pocket dimension and summoned his ring to his finger, before teleportating to the 9th floor. Location: Tomb of Nazarick. Place: 10th floor. Momoga's room. Time: late evening. Momoga was in her quarters looking at herself in the mirror. She fixed her hair as best she could, and looked at herself in the black and purple cocktail dress, with the slit up the side that went way past her hip, the necklace of Morgana which normally increased her magical output by 40%, but here it made a good accessory, and a pair of stiletto heels. She had sprayed herself with a succubus perfume that would enhance her intended target's desire. Everything was perfect, except that she was nervous about what would happen. Taking a breath, she raised her right hand and pointed it at the mirror. "Ardor enchantment maximum," said Momoga. The spell hit the mirror and rebounded on herself. It hit Momoga between the eyes, and made her eyes gain a pink hue. In Idrisil, the spell gave a physical and magical buff to male or female characters if they were hit with it. The flavor text of the spell said that people gained a powerful desire to be with the person they love. The mirror that she used was the mirror of her eyes, a common magical item that allowed people to narrow down the location of uncommon resources for item crafting or potions. Heroes showed one their heart's desire, and gave a magical enhancement to spells and items of love lust, if they planned on trying to get what they're intended. Well, Momoga planned on taking a fox tonight. A knock sounded on her chamber door. Vanishing the mirror, she walked over to the chamber doors, the clicking of her heels echoing throughout the chamber. She grasped the handle and opened the door to find Yuzukage there. "You wanted to see me, Mo," started Yuzukage only for his lips to dry up. Momoga. Momoga pulled Yuzukage into the room and closed the door as she pushed her large breasts against his chest. "Momoga," yelled Yuzukage. "Momo," Sana put her finger to Yuzu, Naruto's lips. "Tonight I don't want the frontline commander of Ainzal gown. I don't want the Lord of Nine Tails. I don't want the CEO of Uzumaki Industries. I want the man who is my best friend, the man who I love. I Suzuki-sana want you Uzumaki Naruto," said Sana. Naruto growled at Sana and picked her up by her thighs and hoisted her into the air. "If I take you here and now, Sana, no one else will have you. I'm going to break you tonight, I'm going to you, and then I'm going to make love to you in such a way that you won't forget what I do to you," said Naruto. Sana leaned in and said the words that sealed her fate. "Then do it, my love," said Sana. Suzuki-sana didn't know how many times she had orgasmed from the number of times and ways Naruto had taken her, and not only cumin her, but noted the entrance to her womb shut. No matter how many times and ways she rode him to completion, revealing in the feeling. They had started out rough and violent, allowing their former avatars' desires to bleed into their desire. Yuzukage's desire to breed every female he mated with, and Momoga's desire to dominate and to a lesser extent be dominated, and birth several daughters. Near the end their lust had weaned and they had made love. Slow, tender, passionate. They had kissed each other, their lips staying together until their lungs burned with the need for oxygen. Time had become lost there. Minutes, hours, days. They didn't know, all they knew was in the end they were complete. Sana snuggled up to Naruto in the bed. Her room was a complete mess and looked like they had gone about 20 rounds, which wasn't too far from the truth. "Oh, that was amazing," cooed Sana. "You were amazing, Sana-chan. Where did all that come from?" asked Naruto. Sana chuckled and managed, with a very pleasant soreness that went from her core to her entire body, to climb atop Naruto and rock her womanhood, dripping with copious amounts of their combined fluids over his still hard cock. "You don't know how long I've wanted to do that, my lord," said Sana. Naruto chuckled and grabbed her hips. "I can only imagine. The feeling we're there, I think we were both too scared to allow them to manifest. Hell, might as well skip the wedding and declare ourselves married," said Naruto. "Only for you, lord," said Sana with a smirk on her face. Sana leaned down and kissed Naruto, not like one of their many passion-filled ones that had. This one was tender, loving. Like their first kiss of that evening. It conveyed everything that she was feeling. Love, a concept that should have been forged to her as a wraith, a demon from the underworld. When we were human, that might have been it. That we had then on that day was nothing but two lonely souls who needed an outlet. Here as we are, I'm not allowing you to go. You are mine, Lord Nazarick. You can have as many lovers as you want, but you belong to me as both Naruto and Yuzukage, said Momoga. Yuzukage nodded. I'm glad, but I'm telling you now I'm not as nice about sharing you with other men. Women are one thing, but no other man can lay with you, said Yuzukage. Momoga smirked. That's fine. I never planned on laying with another man. Women though, well I do like how Sheltier and her brides play, said Momoga. Yuzukage growled hearing this, before he flipped her over and they began to make love again. Location: Tomb of Nazark. Place: 9th floor throne room. Time: early morning. The denizens of Nazark were gathered in the throne room as per the orders of the supreme beings. Albedo was on her knee at the head of all of the denizens of Nazark. Not long after Momoga and Yuzukage arrived. Momoga stopped before the throne, before taking a seat upon the right armrest, and crossed her legs as Naruto took the seat. Many members of the Tomb of Nazark looked on his shock at this. As far as many of them knew, Momoga was the only person who had ever sat upon the throne. Muttering broke out throughout the hall at this turn of events. Momoga held up her hand making everyone go silent. Denizens of Nazark. I understand that this is a bit strange, but I have come to a decision as the former ruler of Nazark. I will allow my Lord Nazark to explain. Yuzukage chuckled at this. Thank you Lady Nazark. As of today there is no one true ruler of the Tomb of Nazark or the former guild Ainzal gown, rather Momoga, and I now share that responsibility. We are no longer just Momoga and Yuzukage, but Yuzukage Nazark and Momoga Nazark, husband and wife. Seeing as this has happened I'll soon be advocating my former duties as the frontline commander to someone else. In fact soon the positions that were around in Yggdrasil will be reworked and remade. That will be discussed at length with the floor guardians in a separate meeting, said Yuzukage. Albedo stood up and approached the throne. We creations of the supreme beings have heard your decree Lord Nazark. Lady Nazark we have heard your wishes, and we will fulfill all aspects of what you need us to do. All hail Lord and Lady Nazark, yelled everyone in the throne room. Urantal was considered a good location for copper to gold ranked adventurers. Of course, the odd platinum and even mithril ranked adventurers, the bottom floor of the bar, wasn't packed by any means, but it wasn't empty either. With 20 or so people, majority of them being iron ranked with the odd silver and gold ranked adventurer mixed in. The door opened up prompting everyone to look at the people who opened the door. Standing there were 4 people. On the outer left side was a young woman with long braided red hair, dark-skinned, and a supple figure, however it was her eyes that drew you and trapped you in her gaze. She wore a bronze overbust corset with a vertical strip of lighter brown in the center, skin-tight black leather pants, and a cap over her head. Behind her back was a large black and silver scepter. Standing on the outer right side was a beauty that was equal to the redhead, but for different reasons. She has elegant, snow-white-skinned, black pony-tailed beauty wearing a white blouse that made her chest stand out slightly, brown pants tucked into black boots, a red cape and a simple brown belt. Her weapon was a simple gladiolus sword. On the inner left side of the group was a princess, not a goddess among ordinary women. Sure the other 2 were beautiful, but she made the other 2 look plain by comparison. She had skin that was a few shades lighter than the red-haired woman, and shimmering black hair that reached her waist, wearing a revealing set of robes that gave a good view of her breasts, and had slits up her right leg stopping at her hip, thigh-high boots with a golden trim, a large pointed purple hat with a gold band around it, 2 leather belts that crisscrossed on her wide hips, and a wooden staff made from elder wood with a red orb in the center. Finally was the only man of the group. He was tall, but not overly so. His hair was long enough to reach the middle of his back, and was as red as the woman on the outermost left. A sister or distant cousin perhaps, as his skin was more of a peach. He wore a white kimono with a red and white cherry blossom flower crest at the collar and sleeves. The white sashiniki hakama which are gathered at the ankles, long yellow flowing sash with violet detail over this. He wore black and silver armor. Includes a spiked pauldron that covers his left shoulder, attached by red ropes to the upper section of his black cuirass, with lotus petal faults that possess light gray trim. His weapon seemed to be one of Eastern influence. The katana of many of the more experienced adventurers recalled. The sheath looked runic in design as did the hilt. Aside from that the blade seemed to radiate an aura of its own. 2. Aside from the power this group seemed to have and the high-value equipment which probably marked them as born nobles, the only thing that held them back was the fact that they were all copper plates. The lowest of the low-ranked adventurers. The male of the group walks forward and to the innkeeper. The red-haired man smiled. Good morning, sir. My companions and I would like a room, said the red-haired man. We have a few rooms here, but not many with more than 2 beds. The only room with 4 beds has already been picked up by a group of gold plates for the next month, said the keeper. That's fine, said the red-haired woman as she jumped onto the red-haired man's back. Naisama and I can consummate our love anywhere we want. 3. The red-haired man blushed. Emoto please, we are in polite company, said the red-haired man. The dark-haired beauty sighed as she grabbed the ear of the red-haired woman making her squeal. Please stop this nonsense, Regina-sama. It is unbecoming of your position and doesn't reflect on his lordship very well. The now-named Regina turned and stuck her tongue out at the black-haired woman. The keeper looked between the 2. You 2 siblings or something? Asked the keeper. The witch gave a small laugh. Something of the sort. She is a member of my beloved's clan, said the witch. The keeper nodded, being quite familiar with this type of thing. Cousins who were really lovers, siblings who couldn't be together due to family. Hell, he had even encountered a mother and son who were in love and had a child on the way. That was just the way of the world, he guessed. That will be 15 silver or 3 gold for 5 nights. Dinner is included, but if you want breakfast or lunch that's an extra 2 gold, said the keeper. The red-haired man nodded and placed the 3 gold on bar. The room is all we need, said the man. The keeper nodded. 2nd floor, 5th door on the left, said the keeper. The group turned to the stairs and began to walk to the stairs, only to be stopped as the iron plate put his foot out in front of the group. Regina narrowed her beautiful eyes. What's the big idea putting your feet in front of Nai-sama? The man smirked at Regina. I apologize, little lady, but your Nai-sama has quite a bit of gold. I'm sure he can spare some for his superiors, but if not he can share you girls with us. I'm sure you don't need all that company, said the man. The red-haired man narrowed his eyes, before he lashed out with his hand and grabbed the man before lifting him up high into the air. Despite his looks, the red-haired man was all muscle. His purple eyes glowed in eerie and deadly blood red. Never threaten to take from me, yelled the man, unleashed a burst of aura, before throwing the man away. A young woman in her 20th summer of life was content to ignore the group. Untidy red hair trimmed short for easy movement in combat. Although her features aren't bad and her blue eyes are as sharp as her sword, her skin is weak-colored after long exposure to the sun. Wearing low-grade leather armor. This woman was Brita, an iron-plate adventurer who freelanced as a ranger. She didn't really want to join up with the party, since female adventurers were oftentimes preyed upon by quite unsavory individuals. Brita had a reputation as being one of the few female adventurers that were quite strong among the low ranks. She herself thought that she was closer to a gold-ranked adventurer, but that was a guild chose. As the other iron-plate adventurer slammed into her table, she saw her hard work break right in front of her. What the hell? Yelled Brita as she stormed over to the red-haired man. The red-haired man looked at her and raised an eyebrow. Can I hate you? Asked the red-haired man. Brita began to shake in anger at this bastard's disrespect. You just destroyed my high-end healing potion. I had to skip meals and even stop drinking to afford that potion. 7 gold pieces. You owe me. Growled out Brita. How dare you speak to Nai-sama that way? Growled Regina, reaching for her. Easy, Regina. I'm sure Arashi has this under control, said the witch. The red-haired man sighed, before he reached into his side pouch and pulled out a potion that was red in color. Brita snatched the potion and held it up. A red potion, thought Brita. Are we good, miss? Asked the now-named Arashi. Yeah. For now. The cleric, 2 mages, and a samurai. Rare that we see anyone from the Eastern Conference here, said Brita, pocketing the potion. Oh? You know where we come from? Asked Regina. Brita ran a hand through her hair. Yeah. Kinda hard to miss with those exotic looks. Regina and I come from a small collective of villages not associated with the EC. We prefer to work and train our own warriors. You wouldn't have heard of our villages before you ask, said Arashi. Brita raised a brow at this. I see. Well, if you're in the market for a ranger, don't hesitate to look me up. Name's Brita. Arashi smiled. My name is Namikaze Arashi. The red-haired girl is my little cousin and priestess from my home village Senju Regina. The dark-haired swordswoman is my family retainer Nablight. And finally the woman who is next to me is my fiancé Momo. We are the party Stormfront, said Arashi. Brita nodded and looked at her new potion again, before walking away. Stormfront retired to their room. It was a small affair with a single desk and 2 twin-size beds. Sana took a seat at the only chair in the room. Regina and Nate both sat on the bed as Arashi leaned on the bed. Momo raised her hand, making it glow. Barrier, magic detect, repulse sight, sense enemy, deaf. There, now no one outside of this room will be aware of what we get up to, unless they can break 5th tier magic, said Momoga. Yuzukich nodded. Then we have a moment to let our hair down and think. We also really need to go over all the operations we currently have in place, said Yuzukich. Momoga nodded. Very well then, my lord husband, said Momoga, getting up and kissing Yuzukich on the neck. Naruto Yuzukich didn't even blush at this point in time. After a month of marriage to the woman, he had become used to her teasing. Regardless of everything they did together. The amount of the two had when they were not busy was actually pretty insane. He was actually surprised in a way that he hadn't put a baby in her Albedo yet. Oh, that was another thing that had happened. Momoga-sana had basically made it open invite to Naruto's bed when she couldn't take care of his needs. Honestly, Naruto was about 50% sure that this was due to the fact that she had a few classes in succubus, and 50% sure that this had to, due to the fact that one of her best friends was a huge pervert. Have you not seen Sheltier? But that was neither here nor there. First we have Shield on a long-term undercover mission inside of the Empire. The only way she can return is upon either death or one of the memory triggers is activated. That would spell imitate danger to Nazark. Second, we have Seba's in Solution out and about acting as a traveling noblewoman and her servant. Third, Kwekita says the new frontline commander as you appointed him is looking into the demi-humans and lizardmen. 3 operations that you created, said Momoga. Yuzukich nodded. You have 2 operations going on at this time. You have demiurges working on obtaining materials for scrolls as well as ink, or is in the tracking something that has the creatures inside on edge, said Yuzukichi. We have our own mission to complete. Lupus Regina, Naruto. What are our goals? Asked Momoga. We are to collect information and earn renown, said Lupus. We are also to earn the currency that is used in this world to supplement our own treasures inside of Nazark, said Nabe. Correct, said Yuzukichi as he took his sword and off and laid on the bed. Get some rest. We will go to the guild and get a quest first thing in the morning. That makes sense, except for one thing, Lord Yuzukichi. Lady Momoga, said Nabril, bowing to her lord and lady. It's Arashi. And it Momo Nabe. And you don't have to call me Lord Arashi, said Yuzukichi. Arashi. Of course, lo, Arashi-san, said Nabe. The three women with him nodded in agreement and went to lay down themselves. Location. The Rental. Place. Adventurers Guild. Time. Afternoon. When the group entered the guild, Arashi noticed several people looking at them. Apparently word had spread fast about what had happened in the inn, and several people were praising them. Judging them. The gold and platinum were judging their worth. Let them judge. None of them were even strong enough to handle the likes of neighbor Regina. Momo walked up to the notice board and frowned at how unorganized it was. This was most likely the salary woman in her who spent days on end organizing papers. She quickly read over the information of the quest, and realized that the system they had set up had copper plates doing things like goblin exterminations, slime removals and the like. Nothing that was even worthy of them. Well, Momo-chan? Asked Arashi. Momo shook her head. None of these are worthy of us, beloved, said Momo. Regina put her hands behind her head. Naisama, this sucks. Can't we just take the strongest quest and be done with it? Asked the frowning redhead. Hey girlie, I suggest you keep your lips shut. You're Orikis and barely worthy of taking those low-class quests, said a gold-plate adventurer. Nabe frowned. Worm. How dare you insult my lord? Arashi waved it off. It's fine, Nabe. They don't know us, said Arashi. Milord? Asked Nabe. Arashi smiled. Sorry if our comments offended you. You see, my group is actually a lot stronger than we appear. To most of you we are rookies, however that is far from the case. Regina here has cult spirits that were the equivalent of platinum plates. Nabe can use upwards of tier 5 magic with ease, same with Momo here, and I'm strong enough to have killed a demon lord in my home village solo, said Arashi. Several people looked at them in shock, only for a platinum-ranked adventurer to slam his drink onto the table, getting the attention of everyone. He was very tall and muscular and wore armor befitting of his plate. He was missing his left eye, and his hair was spiky. A seasoned warrior if anything. What a load of hot trash, yelled the man. Several people moved backwards as he spoke. A heavyweight within the adventurers community it seemed. A silver-plate adventurer came over. He was pretty small. He had a magic staff and short brown hair. Sir, I advise you to not anger him anymore. He is George Leon. He is as strong as a mithril-plate adventurer, said the young man. Thank you for the warning, said Arashi as he stepped forward, making many people form a circle around the table and where Arashi stood. Mr. Leon, can I ask what seems to be the problem? Asked Arashi. Leon snorted. A wet behind the ears punk and his 3 bitches coming into my town and thinking they're better than anyone else. Honestly, you're not even fit to lick my boots clean. Arashi closed his eyes. I see. You think that just because you don't know of us we are making our stories up, said Arashi, as he slightly opened his eye enough to give off an intimidating aura. That's what I'm saying, you rich little prick. As he got up and brandished his mace at them. With members of his party getting their swords ready, Regina and Nabe got in front of Arashi preparing to draw their own weapons. Momo raised her staff, and Arashi's hand flew to his katana. Mr. Leon, no need for that, came another adventurer. A silver plate. Get out of my way, Peter, else, growled Leon. Leon-san, came a voice that stopped everyone in their tracks. Leon turned and looked at the older man who stood at the desk. Guildmaster, said Leon. I've already put sanctions against you and your party before. Don't make me do it again, said the man. Leon glared at the guildmaster, before putting away his mace and sitting down, but not before throwing one last glare at Arashi. The girls threw their own glares at Leon, before turning back to the man who stepped between them. Peter had the features of a commoner of the Riesti's kingdom. Blonde hair and blue eyes. Unremarkable face, wearing leather and chainmail armor. He put a hand over his heart and lowered his head. The common greeting in Riesti's kingdom. Arashi returned the greeting. Good afternoon. I am Peter Mock, leader of the Swords of Darkness party, and I'd like you to accompany us on a quest, said Peter, raising up and smiling. Oh? Is that so, Peter-san? Asked Momo with a glint to her eyes. Please hear me and my party out, said Peter. Arashi looked at Momo, who just nodded, while Regina smiled and Nabe just blinked in confusion. Arashi turned back to Peter. Very well, Peter-san. We will hear you out, said Arashi. Peter's smile seemed to become even brighter. Thank you, Mr. Itachi. I promise you and your party won't regret it, said Peter. My lord, better not or you'll pay for it with your life, said Nabe. Regina waved her hand. Chill out, Nabe-chan. It's not that bad, said Regina. Momo looked at everything with a smile, but behind that smile was a calculating mind. Just how valuable was Peter and his party, she wondered. Ninya hadn't once looked away from the ethereal beauty of Arashi. He was tall, he was good-looking, and he was powerful. While Ninya didn't have the gift of magical sight, she was pretty good at being able to tell how powerful someone was. There was a theory in the magical power of a person determined how the attractive potential mates to them. Judging by the beauty and seemingly powerful female companions, then Arashi must have a significant amount of power. Not to mention, all of the women in his group were beautiful. Each of them could rival the beauty of Lacus Alvain de Lindra, leader of the all-female adamantite-ranked adventurer group, the Blue Roses. Ninya could never compare to them. Female adventurers were rare as it stood. Some groups that had female adventurers were because the female was dating a member, or she could have been sleeping with all of the male members of said group. It was why Ninya hid her identity as a female from her comrades. She didn't want to cause conflict, especially the fact that she had a bit of a crush on their leader, and their lustful ranger would be hitting on her and asking for non-stop. Currently the Swords of Darkness and Team Namikaze were in a meeting. Allow me to formally introduce myself and my team. My name is Peter Mock. I am a warrior. To my immediate left is Dine Woodwonder. He is a druid, said Peter. May Mother Gaia bless your party and protect you, my new friends, said the large, well-groomed blonde man. To his left is Ninya. He is our magic caster. He can cast up to second tier magic, said Peter. Ninya blushed. Pleased to meet you all, said the young man. Peter sighed. And finally to my right is our ranger and scout, Luckerval. Luckerval smiled as he waved at the women. Hello my lovely ladies. It is a pleasure to meet you all. If you need someone to help you with anything, then I am here for you, said Luckert, winking at the ladies. Nabe frowned at this fool. How dare this worm even think he could compare to Lord Arashi? Silence, worm, you don't even compare to the greatness that is Lord Arashi, said Nabe, not even looking at Luckert. Regina gave a small smile. Please continue to annoy me. I'll take you out like the bitch you are, said Regina. Luckert threw his head back. Oh, such harsh words from such beautiful maidens, said Luckert. Peter smiled, before elbowing his comrade. Sorry about him, Lord Arashi, said Peter. Arashi raised his hand. Please, Arashi is fine, but please get your friend under control. Nabe and Regina will kill him if he counties to annoy them. They are normally quite docile. However, my friends and I are protective of each other, said Arashi. Peter nodded. Understood, said Peter, glaring at Luckert. Then allow me to return the favor. My name is Arashi and I am an assassin with some sage training. The red-haired girl is my half-sister Regina, and she is a cleric. Next is I guess you would call her my childhood friend and retainer to my family, Nabe. She is a spellcaster who can use upwards of tier 3 magic. And my lover Momo can use tier 4 magic, said Arashi. Ninya's eyes widened. Tier 4 magic. But even the best adventurers can barely use tier 5, and they've been at it for years, said the disguised female. Momo winked at Ninya. Believe it or not, I didn't start off that strong. It took a lot of hard years and harsh training for me to be able to use 4th tier spells with any effectiveness, said Momo. Anyway, what are we currently doing for the guild? Asked Arashi. We're taking a trip through the southern routes. Goblins as well as some forest trolls have been making things difficult for the farming villages and trading caravans, said Peter. An extermination mission? Asked Arashi. Not really. From time to time the guild needs adventurers to go out and handle rouge monsters and bandits. I personally try to keep out of the way of bandits, since killing humans is distasteful to me, said Peter. Momo narrowed her eyes. Humans? Does that mean that you have no problem killing beast minerals? Asked Momo. Peter and the other members of the Swords of Darkness all winced at her accusation. Before Peter could answer, the guild lady walked up and gave a bow tie to Arashi. I apologize, Lord Arashi, but someone wishes to see you, said the woman. Arashi and the others looked over to where everyone was gasping and looking at the person. A young teenage boy with short bowl-cut blonde hair that covers half his face. He is dressed in ragged work clothes with a tan apron. The Swords of Darkness looked at the young man with reverence. Inferior bearer, yelled the group. Who? Asked Regina. Inferior is a well-known potioner in Erental, said Peter. He also has the gift of being able to use any magical item, regardless of its level. Arashi and Momo looked at each other. They needed to keep an eye on him. Inferior joined them at their table. He bowed to them. Hello, Arashi-sama. I am Inferior Bear. I'm wanting to contract you and your party for an escort mission to Erental, said Inferior. Is that so? Asked Momo. Inferior looked at the beautiful woman and nodded. Yes, it is. And why would you want to hire a random group of no-name adventurers to escort you? Asked Momo, closing one eye and looking at Inferior. Inferior smiled. You're smarter than I anticipated, said Inferior. Momo leaned back. I can't help but to feel insulted and praised at the same time, said Momo. Please don't be. Information from the east is scare at best and downright rumor at its worst. It's actually rare that I or anyone here get a chance to speak with those from the Eastern Conference, and news travels fast in this city. I actually wanted to see if you had any different potions that I might be able to study and replicate on the trip, said Nefer. I see. While it is a bit underhanded to try and trick us, we can understand it. However, we won't be able to do it, as we have already accepted a contract to help the Swords of Darkness, said Arashi. Actually Nifari-san, we will be heading down in that direction, and it's not too much trouble to handle your request, said Peter. Arashi looked at Peter, but shrugged his shoulders. Normally he would have rejected that suggestion outright, even if it was for his benefit, but it was best to allow this to play out. No need to say otherwise. Although he would have to put Peter in his place if he thought that it was a good idea to pull rank on his party. Let's get going, said Regina, throwing a fist in the air. Location: path leading to Cane Village. Place: road. Time: late noon. Regina walked several feet in front of Nefera, and his buggy with Momo sitting next to Nefera in the front. Nabe and Lucret were on the left side of the buggy, Peter and Dine were on the right side, while Arashi and Ninya brought up the rear. Normally Lucret would have been up front since he was a scout, but Arashi had fought this, claiming that Regina's tracking skills were much higher than Lucret's. Peter had accepted this and allowed her to take points. The reason that Momo was in the buggy was because she was using a spell that would protect the buggy from projectiles of non-magical property. Rocks and arrows, even with fire, would be next to useless and not harm Nefera. As they walked, Ninya kept stealing glances at Arashi. She couldn't help herself, his beauty was mesmerizing. He wouldn't have anything to do with her. Not only did she cut her hair short like a male's, but she wasn't that impressive under her clothes. Not to mention she was a virgin. Never having been touched by a man, let alone one as handsome as he who had his choice of 3 magnanimous beauties at his beck and call. Is something the matter, Ninyu-san? Asked Arashi. Ninyu blushed. Nothing, Lord Arashi, said Ninyu. Arashi chuckled. Please, Arashi is fine. Lord Arashi is just a title that the vessels of my home use. Personally, I've never turled in one for formlights, said Arashi. Forgive me, said Ninyu. Arashi frowned, before his hand went to one of his swords, and quickly drew it and thrust it in Ninyu's direction. The blade went past her head and into the open maw of a large snake that had attacked out of nowhere. Ninyu was shaking as she looked at the massive snake, before falling to her butt. The snake was easily as long as the horse and cart combined, and was as white as Ninyu was. Arashi removed his blade from the maw, flicked the blood off and resheathed his blade. Nefera stopped the cart as the others rounded on the location where the snake was. Lucret and Dine examined the snake. I'm sorry that I didn't detect this snake, Ninyu, said Lucret. How is something so big able to sneak up on us? Asked Dine. Naisama, yelled Regina. To her left. Regina drew her large club as Nabe drew her sword. The others looked in the direction that they said. In the field to their left at the edge of the tree lines was a small horde of rabbit goblins, easily 100 in number, 7 forest trolls, and an orc mage. That explained the silent snake. Momo, Ninyu, Nabe long-range support, Peter watch our blind side, Dine Lucret protect Nefera Regina, and I will take the fight to them. Our primary target is the orc mage as he seems to be the one calling the shots, said Arashi drawing his 2 swords. Right, said the others. Flash Blossom, yelled Arashi as he vanished. 1. Ninyu was in awe as 20 of the horde were all decapitated in less than a second. She didn't have time to admire his work as Momo and Nabe both unleashed chain lightning. The effect of unleashing twin chain lightning creamed chain storm, taking out 2 of the forest trolls, but with the after effect of the multi-lightning, it took out several of the goblins. Regina raised her mace and bashed the head of the troll, before spinning around and gripping the face of the goblin, an impressive display of strength that belied her size. She crushed its head. She looked at her hand and grinned in a way that made Ninyu think of a beast. Of course, the swords of darkness were not passive in the fight. Dine used his druid magic and toppled the troll. Lucret used his bow and arrows to kill several of the goblins. Peter proved that he wasn't just some pretty boy with his sword and shield, and managed to get a boy count of 8 for himself. Within moments the horde was reduced to a mere fraction of itself. The orc growled and glowed out something as the remaining trolls and goblins. Arashi frowned and raised his fingers up before him. You will not escape this battlefield alive. You lord. Mask of blood and flesh, all creation, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man. Inferno and pandemonium, the sea barrier surges, march on to the south. Shakam yelled Arashi as red energy covered his hand. 2. Thrusting his hand forward, Arashi unleashed a red massive condensed energy beam that caught everything in its wake, leaving nothing. Ninyu, no Celicia Varen, felt her loins flare as she looked at the power of the man before her. 3. Location: route to Cane Village. Place: several hundred feet off the main road. Time: late evening. After the battle the group decided to travel a few more hours, before stopping to make camp. Lucret, Regina, and Dine went to gather firewood. Nabe, Nia and Momo set up a defensive perimeter, while Arashi, Peter, and Nefera prepared dinner. As the group sat down to eat the group began to discuss things about themselves. Arashi learned that the Swords of Darkness were named after the legendary blades of one of the 13 heroes. A hero who was said to have 4 blades of the darkest black. It had actually been Ninyu who had named them. Ninyu blushed as they teased her. Well, now that you've heard about us, how about you tell us about yourselves, said Peter. Yes, I'm curious about the skills you displayed during battle. Especially that last attack, said Dine rubbing his beard. Arashi set down his bowl and wiped his mouth. My name is Namikaze Arashi. I am the son of the Lord of my lands and heir to the title of Lord of Flames. I was also titled as the frontline commander for the army. I've seen battle and I've nearly lost my life several times, said Arashi. I can vouch for that, said Momo. We actually met on the battlefield. I is a mercenary that was hired by the Hokage, the Lord of Flames. Naisama is a hero in the Eastern Conference. He placated an evil noble, stopped an attack from a demon, and even fought a terrorist group that was attacking the nations for their own version of peace, said Regina. What about the spell you used? Asked Ninya. I've never seen such a destructive attack spell before. The spell I used was actually one of the weaker ones that my people use. Those spells I use are treasures among only the royal family. Every guardian and member of the temple is taught how to use Heido and Bakudo spells. The Way of Destruction and the Way Binding of Binding. After serving as the frontline commander for a number of years, I begged my father to allow me to travel and grow as a person. He agreed under the condition that should he ever summon me, I return immediately. I asked that my sister his illegitimate child come with me as well as my childhood mate and guard. He agreed. Momo never had to come with me, but she was a mercenary, and she goes where she pleases. It doesn't hurt that we became lovers during her time serving as part of my forces. That was almost 5 months ago, said Arashi. Before that I was part of a group of warriors who were some of the strongest in the world. People who I could depend on and loved as if they were family, said Momo in a bit of a somber tone. Ninya looked at Momo. Please cheer up, Miss Momo, I'm sure that you'll get to meet them again someday. That is not possible. All of them aside from Arashi have left this world behind, said Momo as she sat her bowl down and excused herself. Arashi sighed. I will go and speak to her, said Arashi. Arashi Uzukage found Momoga sitting on a rock and looking at the stars. He joined her and placed a hand on her shoulder. She reached a hand up and placed it on his. No words needed to be said between the two as they understood what the other was thinking. Ninya awoke with a start. Something had tripped her magical defense line. She looked around the camp. The others were still asleep. At least her party was. Nefaria was in the back of his wagon. Momo was sleeping on her side with a pillow under her head, and Nabe was curled next to her snoring lightly. Looking around she didn't see Arashi or Regina anywhere. Grabbing her staff she got up and walked to the location where the perimeter line had been tripped. She walked down to where the river edge where the small pond where they had gathered water the previous day. Monomasking, stealth walk, said Ninya as she felt what was a rush of cold water over her head. She knew that it worked. She began to creep slowly down to where she felt the magical signature of Regina. While it wasn't a powerful skill like Mage Sight, Ninya had invested the time and effort into being able to detect mana signatures are meeting people. It was a skill that not even Peter knew about. Something that she used as a trump card. As she got closer to edge of the river, her ears picked up the groaning of pleasure. No, her ears had to be deceiving her. There was a small rock formation where the sound was coming from. Getting closer she moved around the formation just enough to where part of her head would have been visible if her spell wore off, but that's to how dark it was. It would be nearly impossible to see her. Ninya's eyes widened at what she saw though. Arashi sat on the boulders that looked almost throne-like in the way they were arranged. His armor, kimono top, and sword were on the side. His pants were lowered only slightly past his groin, allowing her to get a good look at his massive penis. It was easily as large as her 3 of her fingers, and as long as Dot. He was much larger than Lucret, who Ninya had to admit was quite blessed in the lower department. But that wasn't the thing that really caught her eye. The mocha-skinned, red-haired goddess Regina was naked as the day she was born, with her long tongue worshipping Arashi's penis with her licks and kiss to the crown. She even used one head to fondle his large testicles, while her other hand was furiously working 2 fingers inside of her lower pretty pink lips. Her arousal was dripping down her inner thighs. Before long the dark-skinned earthbound goddess got up from her worshipping of the large tool before getting up above her cousin, and lowering herself onto it. She gave a throaty moan that would take Seely to places she never had been in her dreams before. Ninya the adventurer gave way to Celicia Varen the woman as her own finger dipped low into her lower lips. Seely imagined that she was the one worshipping that large cock with her mouth. Even though she had never been taken by a man before, surely Arashi would appreciated her enthusiasm and eagerness, just like he appreciated Momo's skills. She imaged that Arashi would throw her upon his kimono and take her most valued gift, slowly at first, before increasing his tempo, teaching her how a woman would please a man and vice versa. She imaged that he would fill her with his seed, impregnating her in that instant, and giving her a powerful child. Seely's hand shot to her mouth as she came from her foolish imagination. Her legs shook with the force of a quick. Her legs gave out and she fell to the ground, trying not to pant in exhaustion and give away her position. Sadly, that was not the case. She looked up in time to see Arashi grab Regina's hips before slamming Regina down on his cock, and from Seely's vantage point had seeded her. If his seed was as powerful as Seely expected, then surely Regina would be pregnant. Regina got off of her lover and returned to her knees to suck and clean off his cock. It was at that point that Arashi looked over to Ninya's hiding spot. Ninya's eyes widened before she quickly used 2 non-verbal spells, and as quickly and quietly as she could return to the others. Her dreams that night would be filled with images of Arashi's penis and Regina's moans. Uzukage grunted as Lupus pulled her mouth off of her master, allowing him to paint her mocha-colored skin. Yuzukage looked down at the naked Lupus, who was using her hands to scoop his cum off her face and breasts, and lick it off her hands. "You're an incurable slut, you know that?" asked Yuzukage after Lupus kissed his cock and put it back into her master's pants. "Only for you and Lady Momoga, my master," said the smirking Lupus as she stood up, allowing any seed that was inside of her to slowly drip down. "I'm shocked you didn't try and not me, master. Don't you want to put a few of your kits in me?" Yuzukage growled in the back of his throat. His instincts were raging at him to show this bitch in front of him who was the alpha by putting as many kits as she could carry. To seat her over and over again to break her mind until the only thing she was good for was for being a doll that lay on his bed too and get knocked up. However, the more civilized and powerful part of his mind knew that now wasn't the time, so using his will, he pushed the beast back into the corners of his mind. "Wash yourself in the river and return to camp once you're decent. We don't need everyone knowing about what happened," said Yuzukage. Lupus bowed low, knowing that an alpha had just issued her an order. "As you command, my lord." Next morning, Peter looked over at where Ninja was inside. Sometimes he wondered what he saw in that girl. Yes, Peter knew that Ninja was a girl. So did Dai, and Luke, however, was the odd man out. For someone who fancied himself a woman's ideal man, he didn't quite see when there was a woman standing in his face. It was something of an open secret at this point. While they knew about her, they chose not to acknowledge it. She would come out to them when she was ready and not beforehand. Although Pepper wouldn't lie and said that he didn't find her attractive, but as Luke's logic stated, inter-team romances were something that could hurt them. "Ninja-san," said Regina, shaking the girl. Ninja groaned and opened her eyes. It took her a moment to realize who it was, and when she did, her face turned atomic red and she shot up. Were it not for Regina's reflexes, their foreheads would have collided. Not that Regina would have been hurt. "Ninja, are you alright?" asked Arashi. Ninja looked at Arashi and nodded, but couldn't help but to try not think about the monster that was inside of his pants. She has seen each member of the Swords naked at one point or another, and none of them even came close. If Arashi showed that thing off to a woman, then that woman would be a bitch before him. "We should get going. We should be at the village a little past noon," said Euphoria. The group nodded and D took up the same formation they took the day before. As they walked, Ninja couldn't help but keep sneaking glances at Arashi. She couldn't help herself. "What did you do?" asked Momoga, though her and Yuzukage's mental link. "That girl is undressing you at the moment. I caught her peeking when Lupus decided to be a little naughty and asked me for a quickie last night," thought Yuzukage. "Kinky," thought Momoga with a perverted blush on her face. "Why didn't you ask me to join in?" "I would have, but because we're on a time-sensitive mission I had to make it quick. Last time we ended up being for nearly a week," thought Yuzukage. "Touché. Still, next time call me. I really wanted to eat Yukum out of one of our slut," thought Momoga, as Nefera talked to her about some magic. "Damn it, woman, focus," growled Yuzukage as he answered a question that Ninja asked. The question about his sword. There was a pause in their mental conversation as they spoke their respective conversations. Yuzukage with Ninja and Momoga with Nefera. "I'm focused on the fact that you didn't me last night," teased Momoga. "Not the point. I wanted to run something by you," thought Yuzukage, getting serious while drawing the edge of his blade and explaining some of the runes to Ninja. "What is it?" asked the sorceress in curiosity as she laughed at a joke that thought. "We turn her to our cause. She already a strong mage, what's the harm in turning her into a demon and putting her skills and power to use for ourselves and our goals?" thought Yuzukage. "That and you want to turn her into another condom has nothing to do with it," asked a grinning Momoga. "That's just a bonus," thought Yuzukage. "What about the other swords of darkness?" asked Momoga. "What about them?" asked Yuzukage. Momoga grinned. This was something that Naruto and Sana had noticed a while ago, but they were starting to fill more and more into their race class. For the two of them, it meant that they didn't really care about humans. Conversation stalled with the group for the rest of the trip to Crane Village. It was around midday when they arrived at what should have been the entrance to the village, only there was a tall wooden fence at the valley that entered the village. It wasn't anything that a determined bandit group couldn't get past, but it gave some semblance of protection. "Is this the entrance to Crane?" asked Nabe, looking over the crude and pitiful design. "Yes it is, but the fence is new," said Ninja. "Everyone, we're surrounded," said Lucre, drawing his short sword. The others quickly followed suit as goblins popped out from behind the main posts, as well as the tall grass. Unlike the feral goblins with their rusted blades and crude clubs, these goblins had an air of intelligence about them. They all wore a range of armor. In total there were about 25 goblins. The goblin in full pate armor and a red bandana. In his hands was a great sword. "Halt, you're entering the territory of Crane Village. Be you friend or foe?" asked the goblin. Nefera raised his hands. "I'm a friend of Crane Village. I trade potions and herbs here all the time," said Nefera. The goblins looked at each other and smiled. "Hey, one of you bums go and get the boss," said the lead goblin as he planted his sword in the ground. "Personally, I'd rather not fight, and those two are giving of an aura that tells me we'd be meat in seconds." "Wise move, goblin," said Arashi as his hand came off of his sword. The others followed suit as they all waited for this boss. It was only a minute or so later that the boss came, and to the shock of Inferior and Yuzukage, it was Enri. Enri smiled at them. "Inferior. Mr. Jujum, it's alright, Inferior is a friend, and I'm guessing this is his escort." Inferior smiled at Henry with a blush on his cheeks. Momo smiled at the two. Momo Momoga-sana. While Henry was cute, Momo Momoga-sana honestly didn't want Naruto to touch her, not because she thought her a threat or anything, but she was just so sugary sweet. She didn't want her trying to corrupt her Naruto-kun with ideals of morality. Inferior-san, when will we be returning to Oriental? Asked Arashi. We're going to rest for a few days. Is there a reason, Mr. Arashi? No reason. I figure that could help train your new defense force, said Arashi. That would be much approach, guy, said the Captain Goblin. The group would then lead into the village, where plans were being formed in the back of the minds of Lord and Lady Nazarick for one of the Swords of Darkness. Many creatures that lived in the New World gave the figure that walked through the winding paths, large elder trees, and rivers. The figure was Orbella, the newly minted Grand Surveyor of Nazarick, as the Supreme Beings had named her during the restructuring of the Great Tomb. The Lord and Lady Nazarick had gone through and reorganized the entire structure of Nazarick. No longer were they simply floor guardians. They had jobs that needed to be done outside of Nazarick's walls, or walk through the great forest of Top with one of her breasts for protection. Fen, a large black holy wolf. She had been given the task by the lords to map out the area. It had taken her little time to map out most of the known forest. A little over 2 weeks. When it came to the more unknown parts of the forest, things got interesting. She learned from several creatures that she spoke with. Thanks to her abilities as a beast tamer and a high tamer, she was able to in a way speak to animals. The forest of Top was divided into 5 sections with several rulers. The giant of the east, the demon snake of the west, the great tree of the north, and the wise king were the most prominent. She still had to serve the area to the south, but that would be done in a day or 2. All in all, it had been a pretty good expedition for the Dark Elf. Putting her hands behind her head, she smirked. I wonder what Lord Arashi and Lady Momoga are up to at the moment. Location: Crane Village. Place: Village Square. Time: late morning. Ninya yawned as she walked from the guest residence where the 2 teams were staying at. She had awoken only a few moments ago. This was the 4th day that the 2 groups had been inside the village. Normally when the Swords of Darkness got to a village because of a request, they would hurry back to Oriental to take a day's rest and get ready for their next quest. However, since they were working with Arashi's group and were escorting Nefaria back and forth, they decided to take it easy for a few days. While Nefaria was working in the area, the 2 groups were relaxing, or at least that was the plan. Ninya sighed as she went to where the squalling came from. She walked around the corner to find Arashi sparring with Peter and Lucard using wooden swords. The gaggle of village girls ranging from young teenage girls to unwedded women in their late 20s. Even some married women took an interest if their blushes were anything to go by. And who could blame them? Arashi, Peter, and Lucard were all shirtless. While Peter and Lucard were quite in shape, their bodies were toned and tough from their respective fighting styles. Then there was Arashi. His muscles were toned to perfection. Well, you could see some muscle on Lucard since he was more agile than Peter as a ranger and had well-defined arms, but nothing on Peter, whose entire fighting style was based around his sword swings. His arms and chest were much bigger than one would gather from the way he wore his armor. Arashi was different. While he wasn't as big as Peter, he was much more toned than either man. The muscles on his back were quite powerful, and he had a 6-pack that you could cut diamonds on, and his arms were bundles of deafened steel wrapped tightly in elven silk. Lookout and Peter both panted as sweat dripped off of them. Arashi stood still with the duo on either side of him. Arashi himself was only lightly sweating. Glad to see you here, Ninya, said Momo from her perch on a fence. Miss Momo, how long have they been at it? Asked Ninya. Not long. About 10 minutes, said Momo with a grin. Where's Miss Regina and Miss Snape? Asked Ninya. Nefaria needed a guard while he went to gather herbs in the area. Mr. Dine went with them to act as part of the guard detail. Peter put both hands on his sword and charged at Arashi. The Eastern Lord raised his blade, blocking the leader of the Swords of Darkness. Using his superior strength, Arashi threw him away, but Lucard charged in and did a low slash at Arashi's feet. Arashi jumped into the air and kneed Lucard at the same time. He dipped backward, making Peter miss his attack. Twisting in the air, he thrust his blade outwards and into Peter's shoulder, sending him flying. Are you done? Asked Arashi, planting the blade in the ground. Peter and Lucard were both panting as they rose to their feet. Not a chance. We want to beat you. We're going to take it up a notch, said Peter. Oh? This is going to be interesting, said Arashi. Martial art. Razor wind slash. Martial art. Speed slash. Arashi saw the telltale orange glow of the marital art as it was used. Peter went low as Lucard went high. Both men thought that they had Arashi, only for the man to twist his body out of the way of the 2 attacks, and smirk at the duo, as he extended his legs and kicked both men in their faces, and sent them flying. Both men hit the ground groaning. Are you done? Asked Arashi. We give up, Lord Arashi, said Peter, rolling onto his back and gasping for air. Arashi smiled at the 2 men, before helping them to their feet. Several young men and women walked up to Arashi praising him for his skills and even asking him to teach them how to use the iron swords that they have. Arashi laughed at this and expressed that he had a free moment or 2 to instruct them in the basics of swordsmanship. As the young men, some goblins, and even some older men lined up to learn, Arashi looked over to Momo. "Hey Momo, can you make some wooden swords for us?" asked Arashi. Momo chuckled. "Sure. I have no problem doing as you ask, my love," said Momo as she created several of the blades and levitated them over to the people in the training camp. Arashi took his own and began with a basic stance that several people took. Ninya looked at the man who she knew that she was slowly falling into lust with. Maybe she was even starting to like him a little bit more than that. Location: Crane Village. Place: Visitor House. Time: late night. The small room the group was using as their temporary home while in Crane Village reeked of sweat, and to those with powerful enough noses, pheromones. Well, normally it would be foolish for the group to indulge themselves in the sin of pleasure, they truly needed it. Arashi and Momoga had put up a barrier to keep people away from their room, just for the chance to indulge themselves for a few hours. Momoga moaned as she rolled her hips atop Yuzukage in their shared bed. The duo was taking a moment to themselves in the middle of the night, even though Nabiel and Lupus Regina were watching on the bed naked as the day they were born, kissing and pleasuring each other, awaiting their turn. "So how goes your pet, project with Ninya?" asked Momoga as Arashi hit a particularly sweet spot. "Better than expected," grunted Naruto, thrusting his hips upwards into his lover. "Be too nice to that child, Yuzukage-sama," moaned Lupus as she gripped Nabe's hair, forcing her sister's face deeper into her cunt. "She's weak and has no real value to you or lady." Yuzukage grinned as he heard the red-haired she-wolf coon. He could admit to himself that he loved the creations of his friends dearly, but the arrogance of some of them grated on his nerves. Well, he would have loved to break the alpha bitch, as she referred to herself, as he had more pleasurable things on his mind. "Don't worry about her. She'll be accompanying me on a jaunt to the location of the Wise King's location. Until then, just enjoy the night," said Yuzukage. The group wouldn't be sleeping until the hours of dawn were upon them. Location: Great Forest of Top. Place: Forest Floor. Time: midday. Arashi and Ninya walked through the forest. Arashi had his hand on the hilt of his blade, while Ninya kept her staff at the ready. The duo were in the darkest, deepest parts of the forest, and would have to be careful of dire wolves, geists, and the like. Or at least that would normally be the case if not for the fact that Arashi was projecting his aura outwards, keeping the beasts and weaklings away. Accompanying them was Aura, although she was under a cloak of invisibility. The duo stopped several meters outside of a cave. "Ninya, step back," said Arashi as he put a hand on his blade. Ninya did as told while Aura ran into the entrance of the cave and unleashed a small breath. That traveled through the cave until it hit its target. The target shivered in fear, before it roared and rushed out of the cave. The creature bounced around the trees for several minutes, before coming to a stop. Ninya backed up in fear. Arashi Naruto's eyes widened and was excited. Standing before the group was a Jingarian hamster that was about 8 feet tall with a snake-like segmented tail. "It dares disturb my slumber," said the figure. "It talks," said Ninya. "My name is Namikaze Arashi. I am leader of the Namikaze adventuring group. I must admit it's been some time since I've seen a hamster." The Wise King looked at Arashi. "You've seen one of my kind?" asked the Wise King, a hint of hope in its voice. "Yes, my friend owned one, but it was much smaller than you are," said Arashi. The Wise King deflated at this. "Alas, I have failed at my primary purpose in life. I guess I shall never be able to become a mother and pass on my abilities or wisdom," said the Wise King. "You're female?" asked Ninya and Arashi at the same time. "That I am, but another matter that is. I will test you in combat," yelled the Wise King. The Wise King got on all fours and whipped her tail at Arashi. The warrior moved his head out of the way of each strike. Arashi jumped into the air and snapped a branch off the tree, before jumping and slashing at the Wise King, with enough force to nearly knock her out. "I surrender to you," yelled the Wise King as she got to her knees and bowed. "I will follow you as my master, that you are." "Unreal, you tamed the Wise King of the forest with almost no," said Ninya. Arashi looked at her. "I wonder," said Arashi as he reached into his pocket and pulled out an orange and black choker from his dimensional space. The choker was an item that came from a raid. It allowed one to not only turn a beast into a pet, but also allow them to take a human form. Arashi never managed to find a beat that he wanted to walk up to the Wise King and put the collar around her neck. "From this day forward your name is Mikoto," said Arashi. Light sprang forth from the choker and engulfed the newly named Mikoto. Mikoto shrank from 8 feet tall to barely 5'2", with a body that was fit and curvous, with large E-cup breasts, short brown hair, hazel eyes, and large breasts. She retained her long tail. Ninya blushed as she looked at the girl before her. Yet another stunningly beautiful woman to compete against for Lord Arashi's attention. The fact that she was currently naked didn't help matters in her mind. 1. Mikoto looked at her hands and tried to look at her behind, before she lost balance and fell on her butt, exposing her lower lips to Arashi. Arashi took off his cloak and put it around Mikoto, before lifting her up in a bridal-style carry. Her arms instinctively came up and around his neck. "That's why my legs don't work." Arashi chuckled. "It's fine. A friend of mine will be able to help you. For now we should return to the village and tell everyone that we tamed the Wise King of the forest," said Arashi. Aura knew what her master meant. "Report to Albedo and tell her everything that has happened." Aura quickly departed as Arashi and Ninya returned to the village. Location: Crane Village. Place. Rental house. Time. Early evening. After introducing Makoto to the others and Lucret hitting on her, the group found out as much information about the changes to the forest and surrounding area. She was surprisingly well informed, giving quite detailed information that was quite valuable to Yuzukage and Momoga, even detailing the spike of energy that had put several powerful figures on alert. Momoga put a thumb in her mouth and bit her nail. This was one of the things that she feared. They had triggered some kind of alarm that they were there. While Nazarick itself hadn't shifted much or at all, it was still several hundreds of thousands of earth, metal, trees, ice, and other unnatural and natural materials alike. Such a huge move wouldn't go unnoticed. However, that gave her an idea. She would have to run it by Yuzukage, but for now, she would keep it to herself. Nefaria put away his quill and ink and looked at his notes. Such information would make many scholars question what they knew about the last century. This is all very fascinating, but we should probably prepare ourselves to return to Irantal. We've been gone for over a week and need to report our success, said Nabe. She's right. We may need to clear another goblin troop on the way, said Peter. Nefaria nodded. You're all right. Prepare to leave at first light. However, I would like to speak with Lord Arashi in private, said Nefaria. Everyone looked at the duo, before leaving the room, with Makoto riding piggyback on Lupus' back. Once everyone was out, Arashi raised his hand. Sound reduction, said Arashi. The barrier appeared around the room, muffling anything that could be heard from the outside. Nefaria was impressed. He knew the man could use powerful attack magic, but such subtle use of a spell like this spoke that he was quite skilled in magic. You wanted to get me alone. So please speak your mind, said Arashi, taking a say cross from the younger man. The Lord Yuzukage, savior of Crane Village, said Nefaria. Quick as a flash, Nefaria had a blade neck to his neck's neck. To his credit, he didn't even flinch. How did you find out? Asked Yuzukage, not even trying to deny who he was. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out an empty vial. A vial that Yuzukage recognized as one of his potions vials. And we kept the vial that you gave her. You also gave a vial to an iron-ranked adventurer back in Irantal, as a way of saying sorry. One person passing the god's blood potion I can understand, but two. That's quite a leap, said Nefaria. Yuzukage cursed. Now he would have to destroy the village to keep his secret. No one else knows. I'm the only person who knows who you are. Since you saved Crane Village and Henry, I will keep your secrecy, Lord Yuzukage, said Nefaria. Yuzukage took his blade away from Nefaria's neck and sheathed it. Very well. This is something I keep close to my heart. If you reveal who I am and put my comrades in danger, I will burn your entire world down, said Yuzukage. Nefaria smiled. You don't have to worry, Lord Yuzukage. I'll do everything in my power to protect those I love. Yuzukage looked at Nefaria and smiled. I can respect your resolve, Nefaria. Come, let us go. I'm sure the others are preparing a wonderful dinner, said Yuzukage. At that moment, the warrior king and the apothecary came to a mutual understanding and respect. Soon they would return to Irantal, and maybe, just maybe, things would be alright. Thanks for watching.